Chapter 63. After saying this, Lu Ling walked out. Li Yunxin looked at her back and thought for a while, then sighed. "What are you talking about?" he said in a low voice. If there was another Li Yunxin here, he would be able to tell the complex emotions behind this sentence. To be honest, this sentence provoked him. He was reincarnated into this world. He knew that there were miraculous techniques and that there might be real immortals. Fortunately, his parents were both powerful cultivators. He didn't know how powerful they were, but now he knew that they were at least above the transcendent state. Therefore he could learn the Tao of immortals from them, from two experienced cultivators. He didn't take many detours and he was smart. Therefore he reached the transcendent state when he was a teenager. He didn't think this state was that great when he stayed in the village, but now that he was in the mortal world he knew where he was. Song Yunzi and Pun Nanzi, who were very powerful in the city of Wei, were only emptiness realm cultivators. The two swordsmen who chased after him and Huai Nanzi were also emptiness realm cultivators. In terms of fighting skills and experience, he was not as good as them. The art of painting at this time was not famous for fighting. But after he was driven out of the village, he grew up quickly. A series of life and death situations soon awakened his old memories. If he went back to face Kong Kurongzi and Chisongzi, he would have many ways to kill them in the yard. His current cultivation level was very impressive in the mortal world. But the problem was, he had to stop. He had lost his parents and he had no teacher. His parents probably thought that the three of them could hide in the village for a long time, so long that they would have enough time to think about whether or not they should guide their son on the path of cultivation. Therefore, just like the conventional education system of the previous world, when he was told about a state of affairs, he was told only about a state of affairs and would never go beyond it. The advantage of this was that his foundation was very solid and he might be able to surpass his peers. But the disadvantage was that once there was no one to guide him, it would be very difficult for him to continue. Even for the cultivators of the Heavenly Abode sect, it was extremely difficult for them to cultivate alone. This matter was not something that could be casually thrown to you, and you would be able to comprehend it just by looking at it. Secret manuals were not teaching materials. From the day he was taken out, he had been on guard against the possibility of someone with bad intentions getting his hands on him. For example, he was cultivating the water cloud force in the transcendent state. He also found another cultivation method in the art saint's illuminating jade slip that seemed to be suitable for him to continue cultivating. It was called the Cloud Ascension Force. The items in the art saint's secret canon were definitely precious techniques. But the problem was that descending cloud force. There were only 25 words in total. The body has 9 orifices of yin and yang, 5 cities and 12 buildings, golden halls and jade palaces and the clouds. What the hell is going on? Who the hell can possibly understand this? Back when he was cultivating the water cloud force, he could spend 3 days and 3 nights talking about the word natural before slowly comprehending it. When he stared at the 25 words again, he felt that each word contained infinite information, but he could not decipher it. The higher the level of cultivation, the more obscure and difficult it would be. Lu Laodao might be able to learn the basic techniques of the Black Cave sect by himself. But at his level, without a guide, it was almost impossible for him to cultivate by himself. Therefore, he regretted that his parents did not give him a reference system earlier. He was also jealous of Ling Kongzi. She had to cultivate her Daoist heart. When one reached the peak of the transcendent state, one had to cultivate their Daoist heart when advancing to the true state. The cultivators in the transcendent state had almost passed the love tribulation. If they continued to cultivate, they would soon face the most dangerous tribulation of all cultivators, the tribulation of vacuum. In this world, the tribulation of vacuum was also known as the heavenly tribulation. It did not mean that there would be lightning striking you, but it meant that people would be lost at this time. Their emotions and rationality might be in a vacuum. You're still conscious, you can still talk and laugh with others, you can still fight with others, but you've lost the motivation to continue cultivating. There were no obvious signs. Many people did not even realize it when they were in the midst of the tribulation. They would only realize that they were facing the tribulation on the day they died. To survive this tribulation, one needed the Daoist heart. In fact, to Li Yunxin, the Daoist heart was an obsession that was beneficial and could be let go of. It was not something that could be achieved with just a thought or an item. If one was obsessed with it, it could give one the motivation to improve, but it would not be stubborn. It could become one's Daoist heart. The strangest Daoist heart he knew was told to him by his parents. A certain cultivator from a certain orthodoxy raised a frog. The frog was an ordinary frog. He found it from the pond and kept it in a clay jar. The Daoist in the transcendent state was married and lived on a small mountain in the sect. Living with him was a wife who cultivated with him and a son who had just learned how to walk. One day the Daoist felt that he was about to go through the tribulation of vacuum. He also felt that he had a Dao heart in a blur. Therefore he searched hard. He could not find it in the sect, so he said goodbye to his wife and son and went to the mortal world to look for it. This time he left for 4 years. During these 4 years the child grew up and became more mischievous. One day he went to his father's room to play and accidentally broke the clay jar. Then the frog ran away. The child was afraid that his mother would scold him, so he went to catch the frog. But he accidentally strangled it to death. 3 months later the Daoist came back. His expression was calm as if he had been freed. He told his wife that he had accepted many things and was no longer obsessed with the heavenly heart Dao. He planned to enjoy life. He was a Daoist in the transcendent state and he was already over 80 years old. He still had more than 200 years to live. Therefore, everyone, including the Daoist himself, knew that he had encountered the tribulation of vacuum. But there was nothing they could do. Because when the frog was accidentally strangled by his son, the Daoist who was 1,000 miles away held his heart and exclaimed. He frowned and sighed for a while, then he smiled. That frog was his Daoist heart. Now Luling also needed to find the Daoist heart, go through the tribulation of vacuum and enter the true state. Liuxin wanted it too. He had never met a cultivator who was at a higher level than him, so the thought was not as strong. But today he met Luling, who was looking for the Daoist heart at such a young age. Then he met the 9th young master and Liuxin. His life was threatened. When all these things were added together he wanted it too. He wanted to continue to prove his Dao, he wanted to go through the tribulation, he wanted to find his Daoist heart, and he wanted to enter the true state. He wanted to settle everything with his own power, and he did not need to be careful and careful. Therefore 5 minutes after Luling left the yard, Liuxin realized he had entered the tribulation. Delusion tribulation. Chapter 64. Most of the bitterness in life came from 3 things. Separation from love, resentment, and unattainment. For ordinary people there was no way to get rid of these things. No one could do what they wanted. People would praise them for being able to endure these things and act like they didn't care. However, for cultivators, especially those with higher levels, the resulting stubbornness would bring serious consequences. Cultivation was not something that could be done in a day, and it was not something that could be put down easily. Something he was familiar with in his previous world, for example, would be working out. Ordinary people were those who never worked out. But when they walked, ate, and got out of bed, their bodies would slowly grow and become stronger. Cultivators were a bunch of fitness freaks who didn't even look at girls in the eyes and only cared about their muscles. They put in a lot of effort and quickly gained strength that was stronger than ordinary people. But if one day he felt that he didn't want to work out or cultivate anymore, he would give up his annual card and become a nerd. He was still exercising. He walked around and reached for the instant noodles on the bedside table. He was still exercising. It was a subconscious process for cultivators to meditate and refine their bodies. But even if he didn't do these things and just walked around in the sunlight, the qi inside his body would still be slowly refined and refined. This meant that once a cultivator entered the tribulation, he couldn't temporarily stop cultivating to avoid the danger. He had to face it, or face the tribulation, or face the tribulation. That was why those cultivators always took the initiative to go through the tribulation. If you didn't take the initiative and let the tribulation find you, then you would probably end up like Liuxin. One moment he felt that his mind was clear and the next moment he had entered the tribulation. Liuxin felt that this was a bit tricky. This was not the first time he entered the tribulation. He had entered the tribulation of freedom when he was 8 years old. He still remembered his parents' surprised and incredulous reaction. The tribulation of freedom was actually a question similar to, why do you exist? What is your purpose in life? This tribulation was not difficult to pass, for those who focused on Tao. Everyone would probably enter this tribulation when they were about to reach the transcendent state. But the problem was, Li Yunxin was 8 years old at the time and he had just reached the emptiness state. To say that he was wholeheartedly focused on the Tao? As a child he knew nothing but Tao. Of course that was his parents' opinion. At that time, Li Yunxin really didn't have any thoughts of focusing on the Tao. Perhaps because of his special identity, this tribulation came strangely. It was also because of his special identity that he survived that tribulation. It was just that the method of transcending the tribulation wasn't what his parents thought it was. Now that he had entered the delusion ordeal because he couldn't get what he wanted, he knew that he was in big trouble. In fact, he always had a thought. This tribulation, to put it bluntly, was the influence of one's mind on the process of cultivation. Perhaps people could control their active consciousness, but they could not control their subconscious. Therefore, unless the problem was completely solved, they would not be able to pass the tribulation. If he could clear his subconscious related to tribulation in a certain way, this tribulation would probably be destroyed artificially. But he couldn't do it yet. Psychology was an extremely complicated subject, and he believed that no one in history had ever been able to do it. Therefore he had to pass the tribulation. His life was threatened by the 9th young master and by Yunxin. Then he saw Lu Ling and was stimulated, so he wanted to become stronger. A desire that wasn't so strong could be considered as motivation. But a desire that was too strong was delusion. His desire came from his sense of security when he was threatened, as well as his understanding of himself that was different from that of ordinary people. If any ordinary cultivator in this world encountered such a situation, he would probably be more afraid, and there would be no tribulation. But for him, fear might exist, but it only fueled his desire to fight. His temperament, formed by the experience of 2 lives, made it impossible for him to lower his head and submit. Maybe he could pretend to be courteous, but he could never be tamed in his heart. Therefore there were only 2 ways to pass this tribulation. Touch the threshold of the true state and find his own Taoist heart. Or eliminate the threat. Compared to the former, the latter was more risky. He wouldn't do it unless he had no other choice. He didn't have the confidence to kill a big demon like the 9th young master with his current strength and resources. He wasn't in a game and he wasn't one of those spectators who watched other people's lives. He only had one life. Only an idiot would risk his life when there was still room for negotiation. He decided to choose the former for now. He thought he had a shortcut, the power of incense. Maybe with the help of that, he could quickly remove the restriction and then break through to the true state. He stood in the vestibule and thought for a while, then turned to look at the cat demon Zhou Xian and the 4 people in the yard. He frowned and thought for a while about the recent events and the people he met, and gradually put the thousands of things together. He felt that he needed a net. It was a web that connected many things together. Some lines and dots could already be seen clearly. Some key points were still vague, but he felt that he could find an opportunity to pull them out. Without a guide, he had to face this tribulation alone. It was a bit tricky. But Li Yunxin believed that he could handle it. After a while he heard the sound of firecrackers in the back street. It was the whip he bought with Lao Dao yesterday. In a few days this news would spread and people would say that he and Lao Dao were innocent. It was actually a good thing that people nowadays believed in the power of the government and authority. For example, that Lao Dao and the little brother came back safe and sound after going through the lobby. That would prove his innocence more than anything else, at least in the eyes of those people. That's good, I'll have the power of prayers. Li Yunxin turned around, intending to leave from the back door. But he only took 1 step before he stopped. He turned around and frowned. Why is it so lively today? He said in a low voice. Someone came in from the front door. Li Yunxin jumped onto an old tree next to the rockery and stood on a branch as thick as a bowl. He had good eyesight so he could see 2 people and a horse at the front door. The man and the horse were familiar. Li Yunxin frowned and thought for a while and then he remembered. Yesterday afternoon when he walked home he told Lao Dao how he killed Madame Qiao. When he rested on the stone bridge he saw a man in black with a knife and a black horse walking slowly. Now there was an old man sitting on the horse of the man in black. Li Yunxin had never seen Meng Ao, but he could guess that it was him judging from his spirit and the newly wrapped wound. He thought for a while and said in a low voice, "Tell the one at the door not to make trouble and let them in." Now he welcomed all variables and accidents. He could use it to weave a net. Chapter 65. Is this the place? The man in black asked Meng Ao. His tone was calm and steady. His hand on the hilt of the saber did not tremble at all. He was as calm as a piece of granite. With such a person by his side, the old man should be very calm. But at this moment he seemed a little uneasy. He looked at the street and said, "Yes. But there's nothing else. Don't indulge in evil," the man in black said. As he spoke, he pulled the reins and led the horse and the rider to the door. Meng Ao's legs had been crippled. At least according to common sense they were crippled. Almost all of his body was covered in bandages. His pale hair could be seen through the gaps of the bandages, like withered grass squeezed out of a stone in winter. "That Xiao Jiaming might not be here," the old man said in a hoarse voice. "I think this matter can be considered in the long run." The man in black suddenly stopped and turned to Meng Ao. "The 7-kill saber is not something you practice. You practiced the 7-kill saber and cultivated the killing heart. But what comes out of this murderous heart is the bravery of blood, the bravery of bones, not the bravery of the gods. The 7-kill saber is like a blade, sharp and unstoppable. It's okay for you to cultivate the killing heart, but why did you hide it? You hid in the Qiao family for decades as an escort and a servant. The edge has been blunt and you no longer have the killing heart. You practice my 7-kill saber. When you meet evil people you should kill them. If you don't, your saber will be blunt. Just like when I picked you up and met the Yamen runners in the prison. Those people were not good people. They tortured you first and then pretended to be friendly to you. But if they met someone else they would have died a long time ago. This would not be the first time they did this. It's fine if I couldn't see it. But since I saw it I killed them. This is the unstoppable, but the mind is clear." The old man wanted to interrupt several times, but he did not succeed. At this time the man in black finally paused. Meng Ao hurriedly said, "But mastering, the government may be chasing here." The man in black smiled. "Those who stand up for those evil people are also evil people. If they dare to chase after us, just kill them all." The old man did not know what to say. He could only shut his mouth. This happened 2 hours ago. 2 hours ago the man with the black saber killed his way into the magistrate's prison. Originally there were not many people guarding Meng Ao in the prison. In any case, Yin Pingji had a backup plan. When Li Yaoxi died that day, he ordered people to treat Meng Ao's wounds and kept him alive with good food and drinks. He planned to let Meng Ao recover in 2 or 3 days before letting him out. Otherwise, what if Li Yunxin, that fiend, lost his temper when he saw the old man's miserable appearance? Although Inspector Yin wasn't so afraid that he would listen to Li Yunxin's words, his heart was beating like a drum. Therefore there were only 3 jailers in the prison, all of whom had been killed by this man. When he announced his name the old man was dumbfounded. Black Saber Ingjuren. This man was very famous in Mingjiang Road where the city of Wei was located. Previously he had a dispute with the 6 ghosts in the river and chased them like stray dogs. Then he had a dispute with a constable in Songyuan County and killed him in the morning. This man did not belong to any sect and no one knew where his master was. When people who had seen him described him, they only said that he had one appearance: black clothes, black saber, black horse. This man's behavior was unpredictable. People in Jianghu said that he was neither good nor evil. In fact, these things were easy to explain. It was not rare for a martial artist to have some tricks and act arrogantly. What was rare was that, no matter how mysterious a person was, there were always traces. For example, when he traveled in Jianghu he always used money. Those rich people in Jianghu often drank big bowls of wine and ate big pieces of meat. They were originally rich. Those Jianghu heroes often drank big bowls of wine and ate big chunks of meat. They were originally rich. Ordinary martial artists always needed to make money. Or they became bandits or guards or escorts to make a living. But this man, no one knew what he did for a living. No one knew where he came from, no one knew where he had family property, no one knew who he had plundered, and no one knew who had given him financial aid. Even after he killed a public servant and alerted the government, when the government came to investigate him, they didn't find anything. This man seemed to have appeared out of thin air in this world. Now that he came to Wei City and saw the old man, he immediately said, "I heard that you were called Man-Killer Ghost when you were young, and that you used the 7-killing saber. Is that true?" The old man answered yes. Without saying anything else, he carried the old man on his shoulder and walked out. Your 7-killing saber is actually a part of my 7-killing technique. I heard that you were wronged, so I came to save you. In my life I can't stand evil people. I also heard that you were framed. I'll take you to find that evil person, kill him and take you away. Then he put him on a horse, and under the watchful eyes of everyone, he rode the horse and escaped from the pursuit of the other government runners. All the way to the Chow family. He led the horse along the road. Of course he didn't see anyone. After a while, when they were about to reach the inner courtyard, Meng Ao couldn't help but say, "Heroing, this is the inner courtyard of the women. Right now Miss should still be living there." Your man after all. Ingjuren slightly raised his hand and said in a low voice, "The smell of blood." Smashing an adult and spraying it in the courtyard, the smell of blood was naturally strong. Such a strong smell made Meng Ao frown. He opened his eyes wide and shouted, "Could it be that Miss Shi? Good timing." Ingjuren twitched the corner of his mouth, clenched the saber and stepped into the courtyard. "Let me show you the real 7-killing saber." Half the courtyard was covered in blood and flesh. A young man in white stood in the courtyard. A black cat, a mouse, a white-furred rabbit and a red-crowned rooster scampered hastily into a corner when they saw a stranger. The young man stood alone in the courtyard, the corner of his mouth slightly raised, and stared at the newcomer with interest. In fact, there was also a cat demon. However, when Lu Ling came, it had already hidden in the house. Although Mrs. Sanhua was a little stupid, it was not stupid when it came to important matters. It clearly knew what kind of existence it was facing. It should hide in a corner and shiver. The young man said, "I say you too." But a whistling sound interrupted his words. From 6 or 7 steps away, Ingjuren pulled out his saber and slashed. Pulling out the saber, rushing forward, running 3 steps and slashing down with force. Accompanied by a brave shout, this saber, with a bang, it slashed on the bluestone ground. Li Yunxin moved a step to the left. "Hey, you have some skills." This saber slashed the gravel on the ground, and the steel saber collided with the flagstone, making a thud sound. But when Ingjuren slashed with the saber, he did not use all his strength. He twisted his body and swung horizontally, and the saber went straight to Li Yunxin's waist. Li Yunxin tiptoed and took a step back. This saber slashed the air again, so Ingjuren put away his saber and frowned. "Who are you?" he asked in a low voice. "Are you sick?" Li Yunxin's face became cold and he took 2 steps back. "Who are you?" Chapter 66. At this moment the horse carrying Meng Ao also entered the courtyard. The old man on the horse had never seen Li Yunxin before, but at least he had seen Xiao Jiaming. He squinted his eyes and hurriedly said, "I'm wrong, heroing, it's not this person." However, Ingjuren had already steadied himself with a solemn expression. He stared at Li Yunxin carefully and his eyes fell on his hands. His white and slender hands did not look like someone who trained his strength. He turned his head slightly and asked Meng Ao, who was behind him, "Do you know this person?" "He seems to be." Meng Ao thought for a while and hesitated. "The newly accepted Daoist child of the old coffin in the Dragon King temple?" "Daoist child." Ingjuren pondered for a while and looked at Li Yunxin, saying that he's a Daoist child. It makes sense that he has learned the lightness skill. "Good. Today I'll show you how to defeat 10 people with brute force." Seeing that he was about to draw his saber again, Meng Ao hurriedly said, "If it's not Xiao Jiaming, why do you still want to kill him?" "Because he deserves to be killed." Ingjuren took a deep breath and slightly relaxed his hand. "I said before that you hid your strength until your saber became blunt. Now look at yourself. When you were young, would you hesitate like this? This person may be innocent. But if he stands in your way, he is not innocent. If you don't kill him, your edge will become blunt. If your edge becomes blunt, it will be difficult for you to improve. How can you draw a sharper saber, kill more evil people and save more innocent people?" He stared at Li Yunxin. "Therefore, if you kill him today, you'll save the people in the future. Although he's dead, he should feel that his death was worthwhile." Meng Ao stared at him and was momentarily speechless. Li Yunxin's face was originally gloomy. He was very displeased with this person who drew his saber without saying a word. But after listening to what he said today, the haze on his face was completely gone. This person is interesting. To be able to say such nonsense so confidently and confidently, this guy had already constructed a worldview system in his own heart that he firmly believed in without a doubt. Even in his previous life, there were so many people with so many psychological problems. Such a person was also a rare treasure. Li Yunxin widened his eyes and stared at him. He felt that the annoyance he had felt when he realized that he had entered the delusion ordeal was gone. It took a lot of effort for him to restrain himself from laughing out loud. He took a deep breath and said, "Your Excellency, you mean to say, for example, you treat me as someone who deserves to be killed but you can't kill me." After that, I realized that I had made a mistake and I immediately felt very upset and confused. Sir, because your thoughts are not clear, you feel that this little setback will affect your achievements on the martial path. So, you decided to kill me to fulfill your wish. Who told you to mistake me for someone else? Is that what you mean? Ingjuren slowly took a step forward and gripped his saber in a very strange posture. He stared at Li Yunxin like a poisonous snake about to pounce. He nodded. You are a clever young man. I thank you in advance for all the people I will save in the future. Heavens! Li Yunxin rubbed his forehead. I'm so curious how you formed such an unbreakable worldview and then, before he could finish, Ingjuren had already pounced on him. This time, Li Yunxin could see that he had used all his skills, experience and strength. Li Yunxin didn't have much experience fighting martial artists of the pugilistic world. The most skilled martial artists he had seen were probably those few swordsmen. The 6 ghosts of the river who had taken the pill provided by cultivators that could stimulate their potential, could single-handedly render the people of the escort agency helpless. And now Li Yunxin saw that Ingjuren's skills were probably above those people's. He might already be a first-class martial artist in the pugilistic world. Now his slash seemed to carry the force of 1,000 katis, making the air buzz. Before he even touched Li Yunxin, he already felt pain on his face as if he had stuck his head out of the car window and the oncoming gale slapped his face. Ingjuren's slash seemed to have sealed off every corner around him. No matter where Li Yunxin dodged, he would have a follow-up move. He would immediately change his direction and force him into a dead end. There was no way to dodge. He could already see the shining edge of Ingjuren's saber and the blue veins popping out on his forehead. So, Li Yunxin slapped the saber that was coming at him from the side. The saber that was about to hit his forehead flew out with a buzzing sound and deeply embedded itself into the trunk of an old tree. This force came so violently and quickly that before Ingjuren could let go, the handle of the saber had already escaped from his palm. The violent force instantly tore the web between his thumb and index finger, and even his body was dragged to the side. He fell to the ground with a thud and slid 2 or 3 steps away. Li Yunxin retracted his hand and nodded to Meng Ao, who was stunned on the horse's back. Look, this is one man's strength against 10 men. Martial artists. Even the internal energy and reaction speed of a first-rated warrior. How could it compare to the spiritual energy in his whole body? Ingjuren was stunned on the ground for a while before he came to his senses. He immediately rolled over and stood up. When he realized that Li Yunxin had no intention to follow up with another attack, he clenched his fists and said with a trembling voice, "Your Excellency, who are you?" But Li Yunxin only put his hands behind his back and looked at him with interest. "I won't kill you. You can leave." Black Saber Ingjuren frowned and looked at Li Yunxin warily, then glanced at Meng Ao. Li Yunxin felt that he was probably saying, "Didn't you say he was just a Taoist child?" Meng Ao looked at Li Yunxin in a daze, then looked at Ingjuren and blinked blankly. He was probably saying. He smiled again. "You're interesting. I really won't kill you. You can leave." Ingjuren stared at him for a while, then slowly walked to the tree with extreme caution and pulled out his black saber, enduring the pain. Then, holding the saber, his eyes never left Li Yunxin's body. He walked to the side of the black horse and held the reins. Li Yunxin waited in his heart for a while, and that Meng Ao finally spoke. "Heroing this, what about this? Sharpness is indeed important. But if you lose your life, how can you talk about sharpness?" Ingjuren stared at Li Yunxin and tentatively took a step out of the moon door. Li Yunxin did not move. You and I still have to kill more evil people and save more innocent people. Although this person blocked the way for a while, when I swung my saber just now, my momentum, intent and chi had all reached the peak. My thoughts were already clear. Why do I have to chase after him and cling to that thought? My sharpness has actually penetrated him. This is killing intent, killing intent. As he spoke, he straightened his shoulders and regained the solemn aura from before. After taking 2 more steps, he finally disappeared outside the moon door. Li Yunxin heard 3 hurried footsteps, the sound of someone turning over and getting on the horse, the sound of someone shouting at the horse, and the sudden acceleration of the horse's hooves. This person was really interesting. Chapter 67. After the sound of the horse's hooves faded away, Li Yunxin jumped onto a branch and looked into the distance. He saw the black horse carrying 2 people galloping along the long street. Not long after, a few fast horses came from afar. The riders were dressed like constables, so they should be following them. However, their speed was far slower than the black horse, so they should not be able to catch up. That Ingjuren already had the skills of a first-rate expert. Although he couldn't withstand a single blow from the spiritual energy that Li Yunxin had poured into his entire body, once he circulated his inner strength, rushing out of the city gates was not a problem. Meng Ao should be safe. Li Yunxin did not know why the psychopath wanted to take Meng Ao away, but it seemed that he did not mean any harm. He originally thought that the psychopath was paranoid, but it turned out that he was quite flexible. No wonder. If he was just paranoid, he probably would not have lived until now. He had let him go because of a thought, or perhaps because he wanted to have some fun. It was like scattering an interesting seed, and he wanted to see what it would grow into. He watched for a while, then he turned around and saw that there was another person at the gate of the Dragon King temple. He jumped off the treetop, told the cat monster a few words, and walked out from the small door behind the Qiao family. As soon as he walked out, he smelled the unique smell of firecrackers, and the red paper was scattered all over the ground. Yin Pingji stood at the door holding the saber on his waist, talking to a few women. There were a few idlers around, but they did not dare to talk to him, but they were reluctant to leave. They seemed to want to get close to a big shot like Inspector Yin, and maybe they could get some cheap jobs one day. Lu Laodao stood at the side and stroked his beard. The anxiety on his face was gone, and his face was glowing, as if he had temporarily forgotten about the troubles of last night. Thinking about it, the constable of the government personally came to the temple to speak, so the crime must be completely cleared. In the future, the Dragon King temple that the constable specially worshipped would definitely be more popular, and the incense money would naturally be more. Li Yunxin walked through the crowd like a Taoist child who had no sense of existence. He entered the door and went straight to the backyard with a calm expression. After sitting by the stone table in the bamboo forest for a while, Inspector Yin and Lao Dao came in. In just one night's time, Constable Yin seemed to have figured something out. When he saw Li Yunxin again, his arrogance, apprehension and fear were all gone. Instead, it was as if he was greeting someone of the same generation that he had known for a long time. He cupped his hands as he walked and said, "You're really good. If you want that Meng Ao, just tell me and I'll send him out." Why do you have to kill people with great fanfare? Li Yunxin observed Yin Pingji's expression with interest and lowered his eyes. Black Knife isn't one of my people. I don't have such great divine power. To Yin Pingji, this truth sounded like a mixture of truth and falsehood. Normally, Yin Pingji would take it seriously if a teenager said that. But the words of the person before him. He really didn't dare to believe it. So he changed the topic. Whatever you say. But there's something good today. Both of you are painters. Have you heard of the fisherman fishing old man? Li Yunxin's fingers moved slightly. Of course he had heard of it. This painting was very famous in the secular world. Most of the precious paintings were made by ancient Taoist painters, or by the Taoist painters who were worshipped by the sect of Cave Heaven. However, this fisherman fishing old man was painted by a transcendent realm artist in Jinghua. Of course, the transcendent painter in the secular world couldn't be compared to the Taoist painters who were trained in painting. But this didn't stop some of the high-level painters in the secular world from occasionally being inspired and making excellent paintings. For example, the painter's Taoist name was Dao Meizi. He used to be a painter for the royal family. After enjoying all the glory and wealth, he returned to his hometown and took pleasure in teaching. On a rainy spring day, the old painter wore a straw raincoat and was fishing in a small boat on the river. He drank some wine. When he felt comfortable, he thought of his life and his current situation. He felt that he had no regrets in life and nothing to ask for. So he made this fisherman fishing old man when he returned home. It was said that once the painting was finished, the whole room was filled with light. It was a treasure. Not only was it a treasure for the secular world, it was also a treasure for cultivators. It could be used to understand the delusion ordeal. This Dao Meizi made the best work of his life. He had no regrets and should have been happier. But he drank wine that day and was drenched in the wind and rain. When he got home, he caught a cold. His condition became worse and soon he died. But this painting was passed down. When Lu Laodao heard about this painting, he raised his eyebrows and showed his excitement. Of course, I've heard of it. Is it the work of Master Dao Meizi? Yes. Yin Pingji said with a smile. Master Dao Meizi has a descendant. Now his grandson. Well, he is also a painter. It is said that he is a great painter of artistic conception. He came to the city of Wei. He brought the fisherman fishing old man with him. That is, Master Pei Juezi? When Lu Laodao said this, he looked at Li Yunxin subconsciously. He knew that Li Yunxin was very powerful in some aspects. But in the art of painting, although Laodao knew that his brother Xin was much better than him, he didn't know how much better. Because the water cloud force that Li Yunxin passed on to him was mainly used to refine the spirit and body. Li Yunxin didn't say it, so Laodao didn't know. What he was practicing now was the most authentic and core dharma of Tianxin. He, Laodao of the primordial chaos, was indeed a proper cultivator. He wasn't a rogue Taoist in the secular world anymore. But for Lu Laodao, he had never seen the painting Taoists of the grotto heavens and sections. He didn't even know of their existence. As far as he knew, painters were only those in the secular world. According to the states of Daotong and Kenzhou, there were 5 realms of Xuanzhen void form. But the 5 realms of a painter could not be compared to the 5 realms of a proper cultivator. At least in this world, there had never been a painter above the transcendent state. In Lu Laodao's mind, that was probably impossible. But on this point he was right. Painters in the secular world did not have a guide. Even if they cultivated to the transcendent state, they didn't know there was such a thing as a heart of Tao. How could they break through to the true state? Therefore, at this moment, Lu Laodao didn't know how Brother Xin compared to Master Daomei's grandson Pei Juezi. Even though he was not convinced, but he couldn't help but feel that Brother Xin shouldn't be better than him. Pei Juezi was the grandson of a royal painter. He had seen a lot since he was a child. He had countless famous paintings at home. Even if Brother Xin was born in a rich and powerful family, how could he compare? Lu Laodao couldn't help but worry. He knew that Li Yunxin was a proud person. After Yin Pingji said this, it was inevitable that Brother Xin would be angry with him. Unexpectedly, he saw Li Yunxin laugh. Oh? Mr. Yin came here today just to talk about this? Did Master Pei Juezi come out to travel around the world to broaden his knowledge and happen to come to the city of Wei to have a treasure appraisal convention? Chapter 68. That's right. Yin Pingji smiled. Master Pei Juezi learned that there are 5 painters of artistic conception in city of Wei, so he decided to stay for a few days. He invited his fellows to appreciate the fisherman fishing old man. This meeting is called Bao Hua meeting, which means to obtain treasures from heaven and earth. Inspector Yin's words were genteel and proper. No one knew who taught him or if he thought it out himself. But Lu Laodao enjoyed it very much. He claimed that he was one of the 5 painters of artistic conception in city of Wei, but no one paid attention to him. He had barely touched the edge of the concept, but the other 4 had been famous for a long time and were extremely wealthy. Now that Yin Pingji mentioned him and even said that he might be able to attend the meeting, Old Taoist Lu's heart was on tenterhooks. He really wanted to go, but he was afraid that Brother Xian would lose face, so he rejected him. But this worry soon disappeared. Li Yunxin smiled. Can I go? Inspector Yin frowned. What are you talking about? I came to deliver the invitation to you too. You're smart. I thought about it last night, and one more friend is better than one more enemy. Judging from young Master Li's temperament, you must be from an aristocratic family. I have offended you before, and I want to take this opportunity to apologize to you. These words were neither humble nor arrogant and very sincere. Li Yunxin tilted his head and looked at him, then turned his eyes and thought for a while, then smiled. Okay, go. Yin Pingji hurriedly took out 2 gilded red invitation cards and put them on the stone table. Actually, it's tomorrow. It's already been decided. Li Yunxin knew what he meant and cupped his hands. Thank you for the trouble. Mr. Yin is very powerful. Yin Pingji didn't know what the second sentence meant, but he knew it was a compliment. But after several interactions, he slowly got used to this person's habit. He liked to say strange things that people couldn't understand. This was really like the style of an aristocratic family. As long as they were happy, it didn't matter what others did. He smiled and said politely, "You're too kind." Then he smiled bitterly. Now I have to go and deal with the matter that Ing Juren left behind. Goodbye. I won't see you out. After sending Inspector Yin out, Lu Laodao quickly returned and looked at Li Yunxin without saying a word. Li Yunxin raised his eyebrows. What's wrong? Brother Xing, if you, Lu Laodao stammered, too embarrassed to say it out loud. Li Yunxin was a clever person. How could he not know what he meant? He waved his hand and said, I wanted to go myself. Do you really think that Yin Pingji is trying to please me? That guy also wants to investigate me. However, he knew that he wouldn't be able to find anything, so he felt uneasy. How could a wily old fox like him be shaken by this king's domineering aura and bow down to him? Right now he's pretending to be weak, but at the same time he wants to know more about me. For example, which family I'm from. If my background is really amazing, he'll be happy to kneel down and lick my boots. Right now it's just a matter of whether I dare to go or not. It's not necessarily a plot against me. However, you're an artist and I'm also someone close to you. If I go to that Bao Hua gathering, I'll definitely be involved in some kind of relationship. Once something happens, he'll take the opportunity to see if I reveal more information. That's what he's thinking. This is called an overt plot. After listening to Li Yunxin's explanation, Lu Laodao stood there with a sudden realization. Oh, so there's such a reason behind it. Brother Xen, look at things. Why are things so obvious? Then what if you rejected him just now? Then he'll feel that my previous unyielding attitude wasn't as invulnerable as I thought. Then he'll want to find more of my weaknesses. Li Yunxin had a faint smile on his face. Yin Pingji is also a scheming B*Tsich. Unfortunately, he met me. Lu Laodao let out another "oh" and blinked. But Brother X and Laodao, I've always wanted to ask you a question. Speak. Where did you come from? Laodao continued to explain. At first I thought you were a brilliant artist. You must be from some rich and powerful family that came out to travel. But you also taught me the method of cultivation. I can't figure it out. You're different from the people from the Shangqing Danding sect and the Lingshu sword sect in the city. Those cultivators don't seem to be human at all. Li Yunxin suddenly burst into laughter. He patted the table and pointed at Lu Laodao. Old Lu, you said I'm more human than them? Lu Laodao opened his mouth in confusion. All right. Let's not talk about this. Let's go out to eat. Then I'll think about how to play with people. The sun gradually set. The shadows of the trees in the courtyard grew longer, but the heat of the day hadn't subsided. Song Yunzi of the Shangqing Danding sect and Pun Nenzi of the Lingshu sword sect were sitting in the courtyard. If Lu Laodao saw them now, he definitely wouldn't think they were inhuman. Because the two of them were sitting in this rather exquisite courtyard. Their usual cold attitude was different and they were whispering like ordinary people. Pun Nenzi whispered, She's also from your Daotong. You really don't have any news about her? Song Yunzi shook his head. She said she's from Daotong, but who is she? You and I call ourselves cultivators, but in her eyes we might not be cultivators. She's the head disciple of the Langya Heavenly Cave. She has the opportunity to meet the sage. How would I know about such a person? After thinking for a bit, he slightly frowned. Shili. I'm wondering if she's here because of your matter. What matter? Pan Nanzi subtly tilted his head back. If Li Yunxin saw this, he would know that Song Yunzi was on guard. Do you really think I only want to enjoy life in the secular world? Song Yunzi faintly smiled. Your Lingshu sword sect lost 3 people, so now you're the head disciple, right? Pan Nanzi didn't speak and only stared at Song Yunzi. Why are you looking at me like that? Song Yunzi twirled his beard and smiled. After all, I'm a few years older than you and I've been in the city of Wei for a long time. Although I don't care about cultivation and just want to be a rich man, your Lingshu sword sect's actions in the city of Wei can't be hidden from me. I know all the bits and pieces. You're investigating and I'm also investigating. We're all cultivators. If someone really dares to kill the 3 of you, who knows when that person won't come looking for me? Song Yunzi lowered his voice and leaned closer to Pan Nanzi. What exactly is going on? Pan Nanzi still didn't speak. I know you're worried. But, at this critical moment you're worried. If you don't tell me when the person in the room comes out and asks about this, I can't help you. Pan Nanzi clenched his teeth. Tell me what you know first. Song Yunzi whispered, the 4 of you went down the mountain to go through the killing tribulation. Pan Nanzi's face was expressionless. You passed your killing tribulation and so did your senior martial brother Huai Nanzi. Poor Kong Tsongzi and Qi Songzi, they didn't pass. If you ask me, how do you want to go through the tribulation? I'm afraid it's not the right path. Pan Nanzi stared at him for a while and coldly said, there are a lot of people going through the tribulation. As long as it doesn't involve other people, who cares about the lives of mortals? Song Yunzi smiled. Then how did they die? Chapter 69. Pan Nanzi subconsciously looked in the direction of the house. Song Yunzi waved his hand. Hey. You are overthinking. How could someone like her not know these things? It was definitely not her. I mean, did you hear about what happened in the suburbs? Pan Nanzi felt that he could not keep up with Lao Dao's thoughts. Suburbs? What happened? That farmer's family in the outskirts of the city has lost a lot of cattle recently. They all died at night. Pan Nanzi rolled his eyes. I don't care about those filthy people. Song Yunzi smiled meaningfully. Fellow Daoist, you are not as good as me. Those mortals are like mud scattered on the ground. They are lowly but very useful. They were crippled and harmed. You can see the mark. I heard that Qi Songzi and Kong Kanzi went down the mountain and separated from you guys. A few months later they died in Qinghe County. A few days later, some farmers said that they were eaten by wild beasts. I found out that your martial brother Huai Nanzi died in the forest outside the city of Wei. Don't worry, the corpse was badly mutilated. I had people take care of it. But the neck was bitten off and the head was missing. Your martial brother Huai Nanzi had almost reached the emptiness realm. Who could bite off his head? Oh, don't worry, In. Probably after your martial brother died, a powerful demon came to Li Yaoxi's house. In the past few days the cattle outside the city all died. These days the price of beef in the city is cheap because of this. The first family whose cattle died was afraid that the government would punish them for killing the cattle, so they lied that they were bitten to death by wild beasts. Later many people died so they couldn't hide it anymore. There was also Li Yaoxi. He died for no reason. Song Yunzi's tone became cold. It was a demon. A rare powerful demon. There is more than one. You have only been in the city of Wei for a few months, so you don't know much. But I have been in the city of Wei for many years. Near the city of Wei, there is indeed a powerful demon. Pan Nanzi's eyes widened. Ah? Don't panic. Song Yunzi waved his hand. This demon is quite well behaved. Every year, it only eats a few people near the city of Wei. Most of them are cannibals outside. If that's the case, I don't care. But this time, Li Yaoxi died suddenly and the cattle outside the city also died one after another. It's not the demon's doing. It should be the other one. If I were to guess, a new soul-devouring demon had a dispute with the original great demon. This was the first time Punnenzi had heard Lao Dao talk about this. Surprised, he frowned and pondered for a while. Although this explanation was a little outrageous, it was barely reasonable. He looked at Song Yunzi. You said there's a big demon near the city of Wei. Are you referring to the Wei River Dragon King? Sigh. Indeed, many of those mountain and river gods were transformed from demons. But since they had built temples and conferred god names, most of them were good people. Otherwise, with so many seniors and experts roaming the world, they would have been eliminated long ago. Song Yunzi shook his head. The two sages also said that if they protect the people, that's merit. Just ignore them. As for the Wei River Dragon King, it's really a dragon. Punnenzi was shocked again. Shinryu? Song Yunzi smiled. Ever since you came to the city of Wei, you haven't been to the Sanhika Dragon King Temple? You'll know once you go. The clay statues there really have Reiki. It's not the Reiki of a demon, it's dragon chi. How do you know it's dragon chi? Have you forgotten what the Shangqing Danding sect does? We specialize in external alchemy. Our sect has a dragon's skin. It's said that 2,000 years ago, a dragon's scale fell off and was collected by our sect's founder. 30 years after I entered the sect, I had the opportunity to see the dragon's skin and recognize the dragon chi. Later I got tired of cultivation and came to the city of Wei. I went to the temple at the mouth of the river. That's when I realized that the Wei River Dragon King worshipped there was Shinryu. Since it's Shinryu, how can divine creatures like dragons, cheilants, rocks and phoenixes harm people? Punnenzi opened his mouth. Then, this Wei River Dragon King, why doesn't it care about the demons? Song Yunzi sighed. Since it's a dragon, how can it only stay at the Wei River? It must be summoning clouds and rain everywhere? How can it have time to care about those demons? Then, this Ling Kongzi has come this time to eliminate demons. Two words suddenly came from the room, answering Punnenzi's question. Then the door was pushed open and Lu Ling walked out. Song Yunzi and Punnenzi were stunned. They realized that the conversation they thought they were whispering to each other. They must have been heard. You. Punnenzi's expression changed very quickly, but he just stood there and stuttered. He was an emptiness realm cultivator facing a peak transcendent realm cultivator like Daotong. He really didn't know how to react. Lu Ling closed his eyes and smelled the fragrance of the flowers in the courtyard. He let out a sigh and said, I don't have time to care about your business. Hearing this, Punnenzi felt like he was pardoned and his expression softened. Thank you, fellow Daoist. Fairy. But Lu Ling didn't finish. After this matter is over, go back to the Ling Su Sword sect and ask for forgiveness from your sect master. Punnenzi's expression changed again. For this, Lu Ling looked at his face and nodded his head slightly. Oh, so your Ling Su Sword sect isn't rotten to the bone. I was thinking that if you had acted so casually before, I would have gone to your Ling Su Sword sect to reason with you. Punnenzi took 2 steps back, looked at Lu Ling and said in a low voice, Ling Kongzi, I respect you as a transcendent realm cultivator, that's why I'm being polite to you. But you're a Daotong cultivator and I'm a Kenzo cultivator, so we're not. Whether it's Daotong or Kenzo, there is always a rule that doesn't change. Lu Ling looked at Punnenzi seriously. Although his voice wasn't fast or loud, he easily interrupted Punnenzi's words. Don't take the lives of mortals lightly. Mortals are the foundation of a cultivator. Destroying the foundation means becoming enemies with Daotong and Kenzo. I've heard about what happened in the city of Wei. That's why I want to get rid of demons. Do you think it's just demons? Punnenzi and Song Yunzi were both stunned. It was true that there was this rule. But just like how emperors in the mortal world said they had to be diligent and love their people, who would take it seriously, it was also true that they couldn't take lives at will. But how could it be considered taking lives lightly if they were killed for the sake of transcending the tribulation? Although it was unreasonable, there were many cultivators who did this. This was already an unspoken rule. For the sake of righteousness, Big shots like the master of the heavenly abode and the sect masters would always punish the disciples who had done such things and were found out. But no one would be like Lu Ling and use the first rule to explain things. Unless it was to pick a fight. Pan Nanzi frowned. Ling Kongzi cultivator, did someone in the Ling Su sword sect offend you? You don't have to use this to make a big deal out of it. My words in the sect still have some weight. Stubborn. Lu Ling sighed. Pan Nanzi didn't hear it clearly and frowned again. This was the last sound he made. With a bang, Pan Nanzi's body scattered over half of the courtyard. Just like Qiao Jiaming. Song Yunzi's face was covered in flesh and blood. He didn't even see how Lu Ling did it. After a dozen breaths of time, he finally let out a shaky breath. Spare me. Lu Ling looked at him. Why do you need to beg me? You didn't take lives lightly. Song Yunzi blinked with difficulty. He heard Lu Ling ask him, the first rule, don't take the lives of mortals lightly, right? Song Yunzi nodded. Pan Nanzi killed people to transcend the tribulation. He violated the first rule and should be killed, right? Song Yunzi could only nod. If that's the case, why is it so difficult? The rule is very clear. What do you not understand? Song Yunzi was stunned for a dozen breaths before he asked, did you really kill him because of the first rule? Then what do you think? Lao Dao's expression changed a dozen times before he managed to stop himself from shouting. However, he still couldn't help but ask, but you also killed Immortal today, so I'm the one reasoning with you. Instead of you reasoning with me. Chapter 70. After saying this, she walked through the courtyard, stepping on the flesh and blood on the ground, but her feet didn't touch a single drop. When she was almost at the door of the courtyard, she turned back. What's the matter? Song Yunzi swallowed hard. Tomorrow there is a Baohua auction. The fishermen fishing for the elderly will be there. We heard that you. The fishermen fishing for the elderly. Lu Ling stopped and thought, delusion tribulation? Yes. I thought you must have passed the tribulation, but this painting was made by a secular painter. Something new. I'll go. Lu Ling didn't hesitate and turned to leave the courtyard. At night, the city of Wei gathered in the guild hall. The guild hall in the city of Wei was like a hotel, but it was run by the government. Officials from all over would stay here, and rich businessmen also liked to come here. The scenery here was good, the feng shui was good, the pavilions were good, and the songs and dances were good. Master Pei Juezi stayed in the lake courtyard. But it wasn't the courtyard in the middle of a lake, but the courtyard of a girl in the middle of the lake. The beauty who couldn't stand the conquest had fallen into a deep sleep. Her bare shoulders outside the brocade quilt were silvered by the moonlight outside the window, smooth and flawless. Even in sleep, her slightly open mouth was still beautiful. Master Pei Juezi rubbed the corner of her mouth with his finger. Thinking of the two red lips and the nimble tongue, he became restless again. But he felt sorry for the beauty who said she was tired, so he just hugged her under the quilt, thinking about where to go next. It wasn't his idea to go out for a walk, but he had to go. The people of the Qin family had to travel around the world to gain experience before becoming the national master, so that they could serve the emperor. But in fact, to serve the emperor, they didn't need to travel around the world. They just needed to travel around the world with beauties. Anyway, the emperor spent most of the year in the imperial harem. It was just to add to the fun. The city of Wei was a big city in the world and deserved the praise of being a treasure. But the beauty was a little inferior. She didn't have the fair skin of the northern beauties, nor did she have the delicate cuteness of the southern beauties. But it was said that a fairy came to the city. It was said that she was a fairy from the cave, an immortal. Pei Juezi would not be like those ignorant mortals who treated cultivators as incredible gods. He was not a cultivator, but he was, after all, from a rich and powerful family. Not only did he meet cultivators, he even conversed with them and befriended them. No matter how lofty a cultivator was, he still needed the support of mortals. The emperor was the son of heaven of the mortals. When the emperor was in trouble, the cultivators would always help him. He had seen cultivators from the various sects, and he had also seen cultivators from the Grotto Heaven once. However, he had never seen the female cultivator from the Grotto Heaven, who was said to be the head disciple of the sect leader. Even His Majesty had never seen him before. Was she really as beautiful as a fairy? But what did a fairy look like? Then no one had seen it before. Grandmaster Peijuezi was still very young, only 24 or 25 years old. Thus, once one's thoughts started to wander, it was really hard to stop. He was so engrossed in his thoughts that he didn't notice that the candle in the room had dimmed slightly. She didn't pay any attention to the soft, plop sound. That was the sound of the guard falling to the ground. After a quarter of an hour, he suddenly heard a knock 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 sound. The sound interrupted his thoughts. Peijuezi frowned and turned around. He didn't know what would make the guard disturb him at this time. He lowered his voice. "What is it?" But no one answered him. The knock-knock sound continued. Peijuezi raised his voice. "I heard it. What is it?" Still no one paid attention to him. He got angry, lifted the blanket and went to the bedside to find a robe. He decided that no matter what, he must first open the door and teach the person who knocked on the door a lesson. But the moment his fingers touched the soft and smooth apricot silk robe, his movements suddenly stopped. He was born in a rich and powerful family, was the only son and was alone outside. He must have something to protect himself. For example, this ghost-repelling talisman that was hung on the door every night before he went to bed. It was said that it was written by a Daoist in the transcendent state of a sect. There was also the two monarchs' ghost-suppressing diagram that his grandfather, Grandmaster Dao Meizi, had left behind. Right now, the two monarchs' ghost-suppressing diagram was already burning. The dark green flame almost completely burned this painting that was priceless in the mortal world. The black by Yanjun on the painting had a twisted and strange expression as he jumped slowly in the flame. The ghost-repelling talisman, above it was originally written on a gold plate with cinnabar. At this moment, the talisman written by the Daoist in the transcendent state was madly glowing red. Peijuezi's eyes instantly widened. He felt as if his head was hit by an unknown force. After 2 breaths, he started to pant madly. He grabbed the robe in his hands and quickly put it on. Then he dragged his trembling legs and tried a few times to blow out the candles in the room. Once the room was dark, he could see the blood-red talisman more clearly, and a huge figure outside the door. He stared at the figure for a while, sat on the ground and chanted the scripture of tranquility a few times before he had the strength to stand up again. He felt for his pen on the table. The body of the pen was densely covered with complicated incantations. The tip of the pen even gave off a faint light in the night. This was both a pen and a talisman. In reality, there were more than a dozen of such pens in the treasure pouch on the other side of the room. But he really did not have the courage to walk through the dark room. He chanted the scripture a dozen more times and the knock 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 sound did not stop. The huge figure outside the door patiently knocked on the door, and occasionally looked down as if it was wondering why the person inside the room did not open the door. Every time it knocked, the red light of the talisman would tremble. It became dimmer and dimmer. Peijuezi gathered some courage and was finally able to stand up again. He walked a step away from the door and used the pen to poke the oil paper on the window frame. The quality of the oil paper in the Gathering Guild was very good. He did not break it with one poke. This almost used up all his courage. He was so panicked that he was about to cry. But he still gritted his teeth and poked again. It finally broke. But he used too much strength and his hand trembled, so he made a long cut. Peijuezi hurriedly took 2 or 3 steps back, but he forced himself not to fall. He really was about to be scared to death. It was the first time he had seen such a situation. Even the dual monarch suppressing ghost diagram that his grandfather had left behind and the warding ghost talisman of the Daotong expert could not withstand the Yao power of the thing outside the door. He knew that he had no other way. But at the same time he also knew that if he wanted to save his life tonight he had to first see what exactly was outside the door. The black figure stopped. After a moment, it slowly lowered its head and moved closer to the hole. Peijuezi inhaled sharply and almost fainted. But he managed to hold on and see clearly. It was a large ghost with a face like the skin of an old melon. Its eyes were like copper bells, its bloody mouth wide and its hands like eagle claws. It was staring at him through the crack. The large ghost saw him and cackled, its voice like a bell. "Why don't you open the door?" Peijuzi gritted his teeth and took a deep breath. Pushing down the memories in his mind, he said, "When a ghost king passes by, I should welcome him. But the room is simple and crude and there are no three animals." Not waiting for him to finish, the large ghost became angry and used its claws to slap the door, saying, "Why don't you open the door? Why don't you open the door?" Chapter 71. She didn't know what method the big ghost used, but no one could hear its voice. It started to smash the door. The duo monarch ghost subduing diagram had already been burned, leaving only ashes on the ground. The red light on the ghost repelling talisman was getting dimmer and dimmer, about to be extinguished. The doors and windows were banging, and even the girl in the lake, who was used to the noise of guests, had to wake up. She stretched with sleepy eyes, revealing a pair of beautiful breasts, and asked, "Qin Lang, why are you so noisy?" When Peijuzi saw her, he was stunned at first and then his eyes lit up. Like an arrow, he dashed to the bed and picked up the girl in the middle of the lake without any explanation. The girl in the lake was startled to see this when she woke up. But at this moment the big ghost didn't knock and only looked through the crack with its bell-sized eyes. The girl in the lake didn't know what happened. Her eyes were still sleepy and she didn't look carefully. She thought that Qin Lang had something to do, and the servant didn't know the rules and knocked on the door. Now that she was awake and her body was beautiful, she couldn't help but tease her. She had seen all kinds of guests and even more that were out of line. These days she knew that Qin Lang had a lively personality and he loved her, so she wasn't angry. She forced herself to stay awake, stretched out her snow-white and slender arms and hugged Qin Lang's neck. She leaned her head on his chest and said softly, "It's already so late, Qin Lang has a lot of tricks." Before she finished, Peijuzi had already carried her to the door. The girl in the lake blinked. "Qin Lang wants to." But her Qin Lang had already violently pulled her hand and passed it through the crack in the oil paper. "Please enjoy it, Ghost King, and spare my life." At this time the girl in the lake saw the ghost outside the window. She saw the ghost open its bloody mouth and bite down on her hand. Qin Lang couldn't bear it and turned his head. The girl in the lake wanted to scream. But the pain she expected didn't come and she only felt her hand go slightly numb. She lost her strength and consciousness. Peijuzi was also dumbfounded. This ghost didn't eat blood? It ate souls. He loosened his hand and the girl's corpse fell to the ground. The big ghost ate the girl's soul and it seemed to have become much stronger. It stared at Peijuzi through the oiled paper. "Open the door. Open the door." Every time he spoke he would knock on the door. After 3 times the ghost-repelling talisman on the door finally lost its light. The cinnabar that had been written into a talisman turned into powder and fell to the ground. The door was pushed open with a bang. The large ghost lowered its head and entered through the door. It grabbed Peijuzi, who was terrified. The young painting master's body lit up one after another, but soon disappeared. The protective talisman that was placed on him to protect his life was easily crushed by the Ghost King. "I am." He let out a final cry of despair before he stopped moving. After eating his soul, the big ghost sat on the ground and thought for a while. Then it closed the door and pulled Peijuzi's body between its legs. Using her sharp fingernails, she carefully peeled off his clothes and underwear, revealing his torso. Then she leaned in closer and scratched the top of his head with the tip of her fingernail. Then he puffed up his cheeks and blew a gust of cold wind into the hole. What a sinister wind! Once it saw the flesh and blood under the skin, it instantly melted away. After 3 breaths like this, Peijuzi's body had become a soft water bag. The large ghost picked up his legs and shook them. Smelly corpse fluid flowed out from the top of his head. When the skin was clean, the large ghost cut a hole in the back of the skin. First, it reached in with a hand, then squeezed in with a head. Just like that, such a huge body was actually squeezed into this skin bag. This Pei stood on the ground for a while, straightened his nose and started to speak. At first, the voice was extremely rough but gradually became gentle. After saying a few words, the voice had become the original Pei Juzi's. He walked a few steps left and right before flipping onto the bed and wrapping himself in the blanket. Clearing his throat, he suddenly shouted, "Someone come! Someone come! Someone come!" This voice was extremely shrill and spread far into the night. At this time someone finally heard it. About 10 breaths later, the sound of chaotic footsteps and weapons clashing could be heard. A few guards held onto their hats as they charged in. Once they entered, they saw the female corpse on the ground and the smelly liquid. They didn't even have time to admire the beautiful female body before they stumbled from the stench and hurriedly covered their mouths and noses. Seeing the guards like this, Pei Juzi hurriedly covered his mouth and nose and scolded, "Trash. A monster killed someone in the night. A bunch of trash." With such a big matter happening, the guards couldn't care about the smell anymore. They hurriedly knelt on the ground and said in a sorrowful voice, "Young master, please investigate clearly. Just now we were ambushed and only woke up when we heard you shout." "It wasn't this subordinate." Pei Juzi slapped the blanket and waved his hand, "Get out. Get out. Carry her out. Don't speak of what happened tonight." The guards who wanted to escape punishment first paused when they heard this and then hurriedly thanked him. They hurriedly carried the corpse of the girl in the middle of the lake out and left a few people to use the remnants of their robes to wipe the floor. Of course, they didn't understand why their master let this matter go so easily. If they had to guess, they could say he was scared, or it wasn't too harsh to begin with. But in the end, it was the ulterior motive of the big shot. After such a busy night, the accompanying steward came to apologize and ask for the reason. However, the large ghost disguised as Pei Juzi only said that he didn't know anything and went to negotiate with the guild hall on his own. The girl in the middle of the lake was not an ordinary prostitute. But her identity was not worth mentioning compared to the frightened master Pei Juzi. The guild was indeed sad for her, but they had to suppress it and promise to keep their mouths shut. At the guild, what ghost? It was just that he had gone overboard and someone had died. 3 or 4 girls died like this every year in the guild. When the sun was about to rise, this matter was finally over. The steward originally wanted to cancel the Baohua gathering at night so that his master could have a good rest. But there was news yesterday afternoon that Ling Kongzi, the head disciple of the Langia cave, was also in the city of Wei and wanted to attend the gathering. How could it be postponed? Even the emperor might not give face to such an immortal figure. When he asked his master, he found that his master was in a good mood. Usually he liked women but did not like good food, so he ate very little for every meal. Madame had been worried about him since he was a child. But after the scare last night, his appetite was greatly increased. He tasted all the pastries he brought from Jinghua and ordered a few more tables of dishes. After ordering, he only tasted a little of each dish and waved his hand to dismiss the servants. After eating 100 dishes in a row, the quantity was also astonishing. The steward was happy to see this, so he gave the unused dishes to the servants, guards and even the servants in the restaurant. But maybe because it hadn't rained for a long time, the vegetables and fruits were not growing well. When they ate the leftovers, they found it tasteless. It tasted like wax. Chapter 72. Just like that, the morning passed. At noon, the steward delivered the name list for the evening meeting. But he found that his master was only standing in the courtyard, looking towards the northwest. It was not appropriate to say that he was looking. His eyes were darting around. The old steward was so shocked that he stopped and felt a pain in his heart. It was as if he had been bewitched. But when he took a closer look, he saw that his master was fine. He was only rubbing his hands as if he was afraid that his hands would wrinkle. He handed over the name list and asked, but he did not read it. He only glanced at it and said, Good, good, very good. Go, go. This was not Grandmaster Pei Juezi's usual bearing as a prominent member of the capital. But the old steward thought that his master knew that Fairy Ling Kong was coming and lost his composure because he was too anxious. So he held the name list and slowly left. Only the Pei Juezi in human skin was left. He suddenly raised his head to look at a thin line of clouds in the sky and laughed strangely. At this time, Li Yunxin was changing into a Taoist robe. He did not like luxurious clothes, but he would not force himself to wear coarse clothes. The textile technology in this era was not very advanced. Even the cotton cloth that people bought from the shops was slightly coarse, not to mention coarse linen. But he was the Taoist apprentice of Hun Yuanzi, one of the 5 painters of artistic conception in the city of Wei, so he could not wear a brocade robe. Lao Dao wanted to broaden his horizons and see the world. Li Yunxin wanted to go for the fisherman fishing old man painting. For cultivators, reading pictures was a clean shortcut. As a transcendent painter, Li Yunxin was actually similar to those alchemists, a provider. But the problem was that he could not make something that could help him pass the delusion tribulation. He had not passed the tribulation himself. He had experienced many extreme emotions in his past life. But after thinking about it, it did not include this kind of experience. Peace and tranquility without any desires. As for these paintings, they were also divided into different levels. When an ordinary mortal learned how to paint and created a painting, no matter how much emotion they put into it, it would still be an ordinary painting in the end. Because he didn't cultivate spiritual energy. However, the painters obtained all kinds of superficial cultivation techniques left behind in the world and cultivated spiritual energy. Their paintings were no longer ordinary paintings. They could imbue their feelings into the painting with their spiritual energy. If a painter at the peak of the artistic conception realm happens to have a stroke of good fortune, giving birth to a strong feeling, and also happens to be at the peak of his spirit, qi and spirit, then he can produce a famous painting scroll. That is, a famous painting scroll. A famous scroll was the highest achievement a painter at the pinnacle of conception or even below could achieve. Below the famous scrolls, there were also masterpieces, as well as those that couldn't even be considered masterpieces, and could only be sold for a few cents of silver to hang in the homes of ordinary people. If the painter broke through the concept and reached the emptiness realm, if a painter at the peak of the emptiness realm happened to be blessed with a strong sense of enlightenment, and if his spirit, energy and spirit were all at their peak, then he would be able to create a precious painting scroll. Precious painting scroll. The fisherman fishing old man painting was a rare scroll. This was the highest achievement a painter in the mortal world could achieve. Most of the painters in the mortal world didn't know what happened 2,000 years ago. They didn't even know that the art saint existed. Therefore, even though they knew that there was such a thing as a treasure scroll in the world, they only thought, perhaps a powerful ancient being was blessed by the heavens and created a treasure scroll. But in reality, a painter at the peak of the transcendent realm could create a treasure scroll. In the past, the Daoist painting masters could create Ling Tu, after they broke through the transcendent realm and entered the true state. As for the spirit map, even for the ancient Daoist priests, this was already their limit. Ling Tu were extremely rare in the world. Cultivators would occasionally mention their names, but there would be no more than 3 of them. Even the Daoist painting masters of the Grotto Heaven had to carefully store these things, let alone the mortals. Although they didn't know about Ling Tu, almost all painters in the world knew about something even higher than Ling Tu. The 8 Treasures Ancient Scroll. What all the painters in the world knew was that a certain shockingly talented expert had created 8 works of art. Each of them far surpassed the treasured scroll and could no longer be classified as a grade. Therefore, the 8 works were collectively known as the 8 Treasures Ancient Scroll. As for the other cultivators who knew of the painting saint's existence, they knew that the Octave Treasures Ancient Scroll was created by the painting saint. However, no one knew if the 8 Treasures Ancient Scroll had been lost or had been taken away by the 2 saints. The only thing they knew was that the first scroll of the 8 Treasures Ancient Scroll was called Misty Nun de Kai Di Mao. When Li Yunxin heard this name from her parents for the first time, she was dumbfounded. So he asked his parents to write the words down. It really was just a few words. He asked his parents what the name meant and what the painting was about. But his parents said that they had never seen the 8 treasures ancient scroll and couldn't understand the meaning of the art saint. But by then, Li Yunxin thought it was right that they couldn't understand it. As for the deeper meaning, he still had to think about it. Thus, the paintings created by the Daoist painting masters were divided into 8 treasures ancient scroll, spirit map, treasure scroll, rare scroll, famous scroll, and masterpiece. Apart from the 8 treasures ancient scroll, the remaining paintings were also divided into 5 grades, which corresponded to the 5 realms of cultivators. Profound truth, emptiness. If a cultivator of the intent realm wanted to face the tribulation, they only needed to look for the masterpiece and carefully study it. However, if they didn't have enough understanding of the masterpiece, one painting wasn't enough. They had to find a few more and compare them to be able to understand it thoroughly. But first, paintings of the same type might not be found at the same time. Second, there were good and bad works mixed together. It was hard to say if the painter was biased or mixed with other emotions, which in turn affected the perceiver. Thus, when cultivators faced the tribulation, they mostly didn't use these kinds of things. These kinds of paintings were usually collected by wealthy merchants and high officials. Cultivators with low realms often used famous scrolls. Emptiness realm cultivators slowly considered the problem of facing the tribulation, so they collected these kinds of paintings. But the number of Daoist painting masters was already very small, so they didn't produce many. After facing the tribulation of 1,000 years, there were even fewer of them. Thus, only the disciples of the heavenly grottos had the fate to comprehend the high-quality and rare famous scrolls. As for the disciples of the sects, even the head disciple of the sect master like Huainanzi couldn't find a suitable famous scroll to face the tribulation of slaughter, so they could only walk the path of slaughter. When the cultivator's realm was higher, the number of tribulations they hadn't faced would decrease, and the remaining relationship tribulations would become stronger. Thus, many people felt that cultivators with low realms still looked like humans. But the higher the realm of the cultivator, the more they didn't look like humans. Since the tribulation became stronger, famous scrolls would probably have a limited effect. Then they would have to look for rare scrolls and treasure scrolls. And this was the reason why Li Yunxin had to go to the Baohua Association. Yin Pingji thought that he had played an overt trick on Li Yunxin and created a difficult problem. But he didn't know that he had given him a benefit. Chapter 73. By the time they changed their clothes, the sun had not set. Lao Dao sat by the stone table drinking cup after cup of tea. In fact, he didn't have lunch at noon. He had been drinking tea since morning. In the words of the old Taoist, this Baohua gathering was a grand gathering that has never been seen in the city of Wei. The great painter from the capital, the only son of a noble family that had been favored for generations, had come here to attend the gathering. How could he lose face for a noble family? He wouldn't even eat at the Moonanju's main restaurant. He must have booked the best table at Cheonghua building. One table cost 50 taels of silver. He, old Taoist Lu, had never eaten at a banquet that cost 50 taels of silver. No matter what, this time he must eat to his heart's content. Li Yunxin found it funny to see him like this, but it was understandable. He ordered some food and wine from the Moonanju at the corner of the street and ate slowly on the stone table. He didn't like drinking before. But after he came to this world he liked it. But he didn't like hard liquor. He only liked the Moonan Chun of the Moonanju. According to the taste, it was about 10 degrees. It had the fragrance of fresh fruits and grains. He drank 1 or 2 cups each time to soothe his nerves, because he was too tired recently. Although he was staying in the courtyard, his thoughts, apart from sleeping, hadn't stopped for a moment. He was trying to make an important decision. This decision was against his original intention of coming to the city of Wei. But the situation was different, because he realized that the 9th young master had other secrets besides the identity of the 9th son of Qi Wen. And he met Ling Kongzi at the Qiao family yesterday. Li Yunxin felt that he had a dark mind. so it was hard for him to believe in coincidences. When the Daotong cultivator Ling Kongzi met him, he knew that he was not immortal. If he didn't solve this problem, his identity would not be safe. But thinking about it further, his identity was only to save his life. But there were many other ways to save his life. He was trying to avoid a bad result and get a good one. However, there were many times when the success or failure of a matter depended on luck in addition to strategy. It was precisely because he knew this that he had planned for the worst from the very beginning. To use Li Yaoxi and the Qiao family members as experimental subjects to verify a certain method. Now that the method was proven to be effective, it was time for him to start planning for his future. He had been living peacefully for more than 10 years, but he was suddenly being hunted down. Then one after another he would be surrounded by capricious fellows who might harbor ill intentions towards him. It was said that pressure was the motivation to move forward, but he did not want this kind of pressure at all. Compared to carefully observing other people's expressions for survival and praying that he would not be eaten, he wished even more that he was the villain. Tonight would probably be the first act of the upcoming drama. He had to achieve his first goal. Night fell and the lanterns were lit. Just as Lu Laodao had said, the venue tonight was Qianxia Building. Since it dared to use such a name and was really famous in the city of Wei, Qianxia Building couldn't just be described as magnificent. Therefore, when Li Yunxin and Lu Laodao walked for nearly an hour to the outside of this building, he was very surprised. He used to live in a mountain village and then in the wilderness. He came to the city of Wei and lived in Lu Laodao's Dragon King Temple, so he rarely came to such a prosperous place. Therefore, his general impression of the buildings of this era was beautiful and ancient, but limited by the technical conditions. He could only make the ancients sigh, but not himself. But at the first sight of this building, Li Yunxin knew that he had underestimated this world. There were almost no walls on every floor of this Qianxia building. Every floor was like an enlarged version of a pavilion, with a 360-degree panoramic view, supported only by the vermilion wooden pillars painted with gilded patterns of flowers and birds. Just looking at the first floor, it could easily fit 3 Munanju stores. Then the floors slightly shrunk to the 6th floor, which was covered with a gilded roof. At this time, thick candles were lit on the roof and by the windows, illuminating the whole Qianxia building under the night sky. It really looked like a pagoda in the hands of a divine immortal. There was a lot of traffic downstairs. At a glance, all kinds of luxurious carriages and horses gathered on the street, and manservants in all kinds of clothes were running back and forth. There were high-ranking officials and nobles dressed in silk and satins, women and young ladies escorted by their servants, walking towards the main entrance. There were also well-dressed guards looking around with bright eyes. After he came to the city of Wei, he knew that the clothes of ordinary people were not special, and could only be described as rich. But at this time, seeing the scene in front of Qianxia building, even a person like him felt dazzling and gorgeous. This should be the upper class of the city of Wei. He and Lu Laodao turned out of a small alley. As soon as they came out of the alley, they saw such a scene, and only felt a wave of noise hit them in the face. Lu Laodao was a little absent-minded and couldn't help but stop. But Li Yunxin didn't like this kind of noise. At this time, the street was only paved with green stone slabs, and there was yellow soil on both sides. It hadn't rained for many days and it had long been dry. On the street, there were not only people and servants attending the meeting, but also people from the city who came to see the scene. When there were more people, the shouting, hawking, and crying of children mixed together. There were also some leftover melons and fruit pits and dirty water from an unknown source, all over the ground. It was very noisy and dirty. The two of them walked out of the alleyway. Unlike the officials and wealthy merchants who had carriages and horses to clear the way on the stone streets, they only paused for a moment at the entrance of the alleyway. Their brand new shoes and clothes were already covered in a thin layer of dust. He sighed and pulled the corner of Lao Dao's clothes. He wanted to walk out from the crowd, cross the street and enter Qianxia building. But after a while Lao Dao didn't move. "What's wrong?" he asked. Lu Laodao looked at his Taoist robe and then at Qianghua building and the people in fancy clothes and horses in front of the building. His previous energetic expression was gone, and now he seemed to be a little timid. He raised his hand as if he wanted to wipe his forehead with his sleeve, but looked at the people on both sides and put it down. Brother Exon. Lu Laodao hesitated for a while and then said, "How about? I don't go." Seeing him like this, Li Yunxin didn't say anything. He looked at Lu Laodao and stayed silent for a short while. Of course it was only for a short while. Because of the appearance of this Laodao and the scene today, it overlapped with a certain scene and a certain person in his memory. Although it was only for a very short moment. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Laodao thought that he was angry with him and hurriedly said, "Alas. Brother Exin Laodao. I am actually, alas." But before he could finish his words, Li Yunxin suddenly smiled. Seeing his smile, Lu Laodao didn't know why he felt that it was not right. He had seen Li Yunxin smile before, but most of them were disdainful, mysterious, cruel, and absent-minded. But at this moment this smile Lu Laodao felt. In this dark and noisy alley, the smile on his face was indeed very warm. Then he heard Li Yunxin say, "It's nothing. I'm here." He didn't know whether it was because it was too noisy or because he was too nervous. Lu Laodao also thought that he saw Brother Xian's lips move slightly and quickly after saying this, and then he spit out a word. His eyes seemed to see through him in a moment, looking at other places or people. That word seemed to be, "Grandpa." Chapter 74. But at least Li Yunxin's smile made him feel at ease. In the 50 or 60 years of Lu Laodao's life, very few people showed him such a smile and said such words to him. Today he looked at the young man he picked up from the roadside and suddenly realized, he was no longer alone. He was no longer the one who took care of the Dragon King temple, walked the streets and watched people's faces, was happy for a few days after he sold a few paintings, went to bed early at night, and woke up the next morning in a daze in the vestibule. If he was no longer alone, then the other person didn't care about how he looked in other people's eyes. What did he care about? It had been so many years. The fear that Lu Laodao felt when he saw the luxurious and prosperous scene in front of the building suddenly disappeared. He laughed mischievously. "Okay, I have you, Brother Exon." "Sco." Li Yunxin said with a smile, "You've been hungry all day." The two of them squeezed out of the crowd and joined the bustling scene in front of the building. But after walking 2 or 3 steps to the side of the street, Lu Laodao suddenly stopped again. Li Yunxin thought that he still felt ashamed and frowned slightly. He felt that he had to spend a few minutes to carry out a psychological intervention on him. This was a piece of cake for him. Especially for someone like Lu Laodao who trusted him. It was not impossible for a professional, especially a professional among professionals like him, to use a few minutes to build a temporary and solid psychological defense for a person who was originally not wary of him in a relatively short period of time. But he had never thought of doing this before. He felt that he probably preferred the original old man. It was very interesting. But just as he was about to speak, the old man had already turned to the right and said in a clear voice, "Fellow Daoist, sure. See you here. How have you been?" Li Yunxin looked to the right and raised his eyebrows. Lu Laodao's voice and tone were only used when speaking to believers who came to offer incense in the hall. His pronunciation was perfect and there was a hint of clarity in his deep voice. It was rare for someone of his age. However, in these 3 sentences, there was an imperceptible tremor and rise at the end of each sentence. "I'm very excited right now." But he was excited because of some strong positive emotion. When Li Yunxin saw fellow Daoist Sure again, he faintly smiled in his heart. Sunset glow was the most beautiful. Fellow Daoist Sure is a woman. He was about 40 or 50 years old. When the women in this world reached the age of 40 or 50, most of them looked like the 60 or 70 years old women in his world. However, this fellow Daoist Sure actually seemed a little. Her charm was still there. It was probably because even though it was an unorthodox cultivation method, it was more or less effective. She was also wearing a green Daoist robe and had her hair combed into a bun. There were wrinkles on his face, but they were not unpleasant. His skin was smooth and he looked a bit like a treasure. At first glance he looked like a Daoist with some cultivation. Standing together with Lu Laodao, people in the secular world would really feel that he was refined and had the demeanor of an expert cultivator. When this fellow Daoist sure saw the old man, she was slightly stunned at first, and then her eyes narrowed happily. She returned the greeting, "Lu Laodao, nice to meet you too." The tone and voice of these two sentences made Li Yunxin have a good impression of her. Although the woman was old, she seemed to be a cheerful and lively person. In this world at her age this was very rare. Laodao hurriedly said, Good. Fellow Daoist sure is also coming to the Baohua gathering?" "That's right." That fellow Daoist sure was still smiling with her eyes narrowed. "I thought such a grand gathering had nothing to do with us small temples. Who knew that they really sent an invitation?" The person who sent the invitation said that it was the intention of the first disciple of the Langya cave, Daoist Ling Kongzi. "Last night I received the invitation and set off immediately. I hurried over and only just arrived now." Lu Laodao blinked. "Oh." Fellow Daoist sure said, "It said that Daoist Ling Kongzi has something to say at the gathering. The invitation was very polite, saying that he wants the cultivators near the city of Wei to work together. In fact, I think he probably wants to send us some things to do. People like us can't be considered cultivators. It's that expert who is being too polite." Lao Dao responded twice and was silent for a short while. Li Yunxin knew that this was the old man's awkward silence. He smiled slightly and went forward to greet Daoist Shi, saying, "Greetings, senior." The woman had been looking at Li Yunxin before. Now that she heard him speak, she smiled even more happily. "Lao Dao, is this your disciple? He's so handsome." Lao Dao hurriedly said, "Oh, I'm Yunxinzi." Li Yunxin knew that Lao Dao was embarrassed and said with a smile, "He's my master's new disciple." "Greetings, senior." Lu Lao Dao gave him a grateful look. If Li Yunxin didn't say it, he really didn't know whether he should say, "This is my disciple." At this time he hurriedly introduced, "Disciple, this is the temple attendant of the mountain god temple in Daegu Mountain, 20 miles away from the city of Wei, Taoist Shirquizi. She's my old friend." Li Yunxin bowed again and Shirquizi bowed back. Lu Laodao stepped aside and the two walked side by side into the Qianghua building. The old man seemed a little uncomfortable at this time, and Li Yunxin also laughed in his heart because of this little episode. He never thought that Lu Laodao had such a relationship. He could see that Lu Laodao loved Shirquizi, and that the female Taoist didn't hate Lu Laodao, and even had a little favorable impression of him. But the two were so far away from each other, and it wasn't convenient for him to fall in love with them. What was the story between them? Passing through the carriages and horses on the street, they arrived at the front of the Qianghua building. Someone blocked the view before so they couldn't see clearly. But now they found that there were already some people waiting by the big stone lion on the left. The big stone lion in front of the Qianghua building was as high as 2 people. The middle of the stone lion was spacious, and the door was wide open, just like the door of the abandoned palace of the former dynasty in the city of Wei, which expanded a small square. A group of Taoists in green Taoist robes were waiting by the stone lion on the left. 2 manservants were also waiting there. Seeing those in simple clothes, they politely led them over, looked at the invitation, said a few words and asked them to wait there. So they knew that they were probably here to welcome guests like them. Those in fancy clothes and horses would go straight to the front door and wouldn't be stopped. But it was not a rude thing. In such an era, in such a world, there was a difference in status. If these unruly Taoists who were invited to come in with those high-ranking officials and dignitaries, they would be like Lu Laodao, feeling even more uncomfortable. Seeing the 3 of them coming, a tall and thin manservant came forward and bowed. "3 Taoist masters, are you here for the meeting? Do you have an invitation?" Shirquizi bowed back, took out a small red invitation and handed it to the manservant. Then another one led her over. Lao Dao frowned slightly and took out his invitation hesitantly from his sleeve. Because it was different from Shirquizi's. Chapter 75. The manservant was just taking a look at it as usual. He just glanced at it and then passed it. For such a grand event with so many big shots, those who dared to come were not here to make trouble. He took a look at it and said, "This way." However, after saying these 4 words he paused. He subconsciously looked at the invitation again, then raised his head to look at the old Daoist and Li Yunxin. He knew the style of the invitation that Lu Laodao handed to him, gilded, delicate and complicated. There were a total of 12 copies, all for the top figures in the city of Wei. Now this thing appeared in Lu Laodao's hands. He stared at Taoist Lu for a while before asking politely with an apologetic smile, "Master Taoist, you look a little familiar. May I ask if we are fated to meet before?" Qianghua Building was the top place of entertainment in the city of Wei. Those who work here and come out to welcome the guests today must be clever people with clear minds. They would not be like the people in the fairy tales Li Yunxin had read, who only looked at people with their eyes but did not think with their brains. Therefore he asked cleverly if Lao Dao was from the city of Wei. If he was, he should be able to recognize him with this invitation. The old Taoist was not a brat. He knew that something might have gone wrong. He said, "Well, I am from the city of Wei, the Dragon King Temple on Taoshi Road in Liuhe Prefecture. I am the temple attendant there." The manservant thought for a while and smiled. "Master Tao, please wait a moment. Something might have gone wrong. I dare not make a decision and have to report to the manager. There is a chair here, would you like to take a rest?" There were tables and chairs in the reception area for the 2 manservants to record the guests. They gave them to the manservants. Lao Dao saw that he was polite and hurried to say, it's okay. You can go now." The manservant gave way again and excused himself. He held the invitation and trotted into the building. Originally, no one would have noticed this place until such a small interlude happened. Xianxia walked into the crowd and greeted a few people. When she turned to look at Lu Laodao, she found that the master and disciple were stopped. Those who were waiting here were all familiar with each other. Since there were cultivators in this world, the Tao must be flourishing. Rogue Daoists did not have the heavenly heart technique to practice, but they did have many ways to strengthen their bodies and meditate to refine their qi. This was also a world where demons and mythological beasts did exist. Therefore there were many Taoist temples and temples near the city of Wei. Cultivators knew each other's sects, and these rogue Daoists at least knew each other. A few people saw that Xianxia came with Lao Dao, so they asked about Lao Dao's identity. Seeing that he was stopped, they couldn't help but start discussing. There were about 20 to 30 people waiting on this side. From time to time they would glance in that direction and Lao Dao would feel uncomfortable. Xianxia walked over slowly and asked, "What's going on?" Li Yunxin smiled in his heart. This Daoist nun really liked Lao Dao. She wanted to come and talk to him so that he would not be too embarrassed. The old Daoist told her the reason. When Xianxia heard him say this, she let out a soft sound. "There's such a thing. Maybe it's a mistake." Hearing the invitation from Lao Dao, she knew that it was for a distinguished guest. She and Lu Laodao had known each other for a long time, so she knew that he would not be that kind of distinguished guest. But she was worried that Lao Dao would feel uncomfortable, so she smiled and turned to Li Yunxin saying, "You should know that your teacher is actually very capable." Lu Laodao was embarrassed. Xianxia thought that he was being modest and said, "There are 5 painters in the city of Wei who have the artistic conception, and your teacher is one of them. Although he is not as good as the other 4. While saying this, she smiled and glanced at Lu Laodao. "But compared to us, he is a real master. Your teacher cultivated and understood the Dharma access by himself. When he was in his 20s, he met your grandmaster and was taught the method of cultivation. Alas, fate makes fools of people." Xianxia sighed sincerely. If your teacher was lucky enough to meet a monk from the cave sect who came out to travel the secular world when he was young, maybe he would be a celestial being today. Li Yunxin looked at Lu Laodao in surprise, but Xianxia thought that he never knew that his teacher was so good. But he really didn't know. Li Yunxin was taught by her parents and the 2 Taoist painters little by little. His starting point was higher than that of any painter or Taoist painters in the world. Therefore, even the 4 painters of artistic conception in the city of Wei and the emptiness realm painter in the capital were like children's play in his eyes. Why would he care about the level of Lu Laodao compared to those unruly Taoists? It was like, in his previous world, a billionaire wouldn't care about the difference between a billionaire and a millionaire. In fact, in his eyes they were still a little bit rich. From the looks of it, what old Taoist Lu said to him in the past was not all bragging. He used to be on the edge of artistic conception, but now he could be considered a serious painter of artistic conception. He also paid attention to the situation of the 4 painters of artistic conception. They were all born in the rich and powerful families in the city of Wei, and they got to where they were with all kinds of dharma access and resources. It was not unreasonable to say that it was hard for a poor family to have a noble son. But a person like Lu Laodao, who had no roots and no foundation, really relied on his own ability to get to where he was today. Li Yunxin felt that he probably looked down on him in the past. Just as the old Daoist was about to say a few humble words, the manservant had already rushed over with the steward. Without waiting for Laodao to speak, the steward hurriedly bowed and said, "Sorry to keep you waiting. It's my servant who is inexperienced and missed your time. I have reprimanded him. Today I don't want him to be an eyesore. Please come with me, I will lead you into the building." Laodao and Shirkuizi were stunned. The people waiting there also heard the steward's words and looked over. Those who knew Lu Laodao frowned slightly and thought about what happened. Those who were not familiar with him were listening. Lu Laodao asked subconsciously, "That invitation, didn't it say that something went wrong?" The steward had seen many nobles who came to the building and knew that some people looked kind but were actually very strange and not easy to joke with. He thought that he was teasing him because he was unhappy, so he hurriedly smiled and said, "That's because the children have eyes but don't recognize Mount Tai. You Taoist Hunyuanzi are one of the 5 painters of artistic conception in the city of Wei. This invitation is for you. There are 12 invitations in total. Except for the 5 of you, the other 7 invitations are all top-notch figures. How could there be a problem?" The steward only thought that Laodao felt that he had lost face because he was stopped in front of these wild Taoists. Therefore, in order to help him gain face and appease his anger, she used a voice that was neither too loud nor too soft, but was just loud enough for the people nearby to hear. But Lu Laodao's reputation as one of the 5 painters of artistic conception in the city of Wei was mostly said by himself, and others listened to him. At this moment the steward said it seriously, and seriously, the group of people were stunned. After a short while, before they could say anything, they heard a young man sneer from the side of the main entrance. "Can you even say such a joke here?" Chapter 76. In fact, the person who spoke looked to be about the same age as Li Yunxin and was dressed similarly. Although he was not as handsome as Li Yunxin, he was still a delicate boy. He was also wearing a green Taoist robe with a bun and a wooden hairpin. But if one looked closely, the craftsmanship of his Taoist robe was quite different from that of Li Yunxin. If the green Taoist robe was opened, one would find that the inside was made of satin. And the ordinary-looking wooden hairpin on his head was made of agar wood. Looking at the person beside him, it was an old man about 50 years old. He was dressed similarly, looking clean and simple, but in fact, it was low-key luxury. The people waiting here were all older than the young man. But no one rebuked him, even though he interrupted with a disdainful tone. Because of the identity of the old man beside him. Those artists who often went in and out of the city of Wei all knew that he was indeed a painter of artistic conception. The Yu family in the city of Wei was called Yu Mengda, and his Taoist name was Xianxia. And this Yu family was indeed the Yu family of Yu Meng. Although it was not the main family, it was also a wealthy family in the city of Wei. The young man saw that everyone was looking at him, but he did not feel uncomfortable. He had been with Xianxia for a long time and had seen a lot of things, so he naturally had a calm and arrogant temperament. He said again, "I only know that there are 4 painters of artistic conception in the city of Wei. When did the 5th one appear?" Some words can be joked in private, but it's not appropriate to say it on such an occasion. When he finished, he glanced at Lu Laodao and nodded slightly. It's not against you. But today the Qianghua building is full of distinguished guests. Some words are a joke and also a disgrace to the painters of the city of Wei. I think you can understand? Xianxia beside him did not say anything but did not leave either. He only looked at Lu Laodao with his eyes. Perhaps it was inconvenient for him to say something because of his status, so he let this clever little Taoist boy beside him say it. The young man did not speak seriously and said too much, so he just scolded him casually. Originally, with his status and position, he would not bother with someone like Lu Laodao. But before he came, he had indeed heard that the fifth conception painter would be coming today. It was because his good friend, Daoist Pananzi of the Ling Su sword sect, had returned to his sect and couldn't come, so he gave the invitation to Daoist Hunyuanzi. Xianxia wanted to be friends with Pananzi for a long time. However, most cultivators were perverse and temperamental. It took him a long time to establish a good impression of them and meet them a few times. Originally, he wanted to go to Qianghua Tower today. Now that he had paved the way, he wanted to deepen his relationship with Pananzi and try to ask if he could get some Xianmen techniques. Who knew that after operating for so long he would suddenly return to the sect? Cultivators have long lives. It was unknown how long it would take for them to return. Xianxia, on the other hand, could not wait for long. It was even more likely that all of his plans would be ruined. Thus he was already rather unhappy. When they were about to enter the door, the Daoist boy beside him heard their words and scolded them, so he simply let them be. Besides, what was Hunyuanzi's identity? He had heard of him before. He was just a temple attendant of the Dragon King Temple. Seeing these wild cultivators flatter each other in front of the tower, he already felt it was very funny. Now this person was really going to sit with him. It was simply ridiculous. It has to be said that although Pananzi didn't come today, another immortal was coming. A rare disciple of the heavenly grotto heaven. If someone like Hunyuanzi went to the table, wouldn't it be a joke? Thus, when the Daoist boy asked that last question, he still didn't say anything. Now Lu Laodao's expression was not good. Xianxia also frowned. Everyone knew what kind of person Xianxia was. He could endure a few words from the Daoist boy. After the two of them talked and left, although these people felt awkward, they could still joke around and forget about it. But today, after the Daoist boy asked, "I think you understand," he slightly raised his chin and didn't leave. He was waiting for Lu Laodao's reply. Being lectured by a teenager in front of so many people, and now he had to respond. Anyone would feel embarrassed. If he really said, I understand today, then he would really become a joke. But if he ignored it because of his backbone and made Xianxia embarrassed in this situation, then he would probably be in a more terrifying situation in the future. Lu Laodao's eyes quickly swept over Xianxia and his face turned red. The wild cultivators behind him also became silent. Even those who were not familiar with Old Taoist Lu felt a sense of sympathy for the death of a rabbit. In just 1 or 2 seconds the atmosphere became extremely awkward. However, just as the little Daoist boy suddenly interrupted, another equally young voice rang out. What's wrong with learning at such a young age? Learning to show off. Everyone was stunned at first and then looked at the disciple Yunxinzi beside Lu Laodao, who stood up for his master with a "Are you crazy?" look. But they didn't know where this handsome little Daoist boy came from. In the eyes of so many people facing Xianxingzi's suddenly gloomy face, he was still calm and composed, and even, they didn't know if it was an illusion, there was even a relaxed and happy smile on his lips. The Daoist boy beside Xianxingzi was stunned at first, and then he gasped and said in an incredulous voice, "Are you talking to me? How dare you?" Li Yunxin sighed. "I say, why are you so troublesome? Here, look, which one of them isn't your elder? A group of seniors are talking here and you just had to interrupt. If no one paid attention to you when you interrupted, you should just leave quickly. Why do you have to stand here and wait for someone to answer?" There are so many people coming and going and they all see you, a child, rolling around here without any discipline from an adult. You said you're afraid of making a fool of yourself today. Do you think this is considered a joke? Everyone knows that the little Daoist boy beside the great painter Xianxia of the city of Wei has no manners, no respect for his elders, and is suffering from chunibu in broad daylight. I simply can't bear to look at it. Li Yunxin spoke with great emotion, and at the end he gave an expression of, can't bear to look at it. The little Daoist boy was dumbfounded by his words. He was at a loss for words, but more than that he was astonished. This person dared to talk to him like this. He gritted his teeth and a burst of anger came out of his nostrils. When he was about to retort, he saw Li Yunxin nodding to Xianxia. I'll help you to discipline him. I think you can understand. It was just as he had expected. Xianxia looked at him without saying a word. Then the gloomy look on his face suddenly disappeared and he nodded slightly to the steward. Take good care of this Daoist Hunyuanzi. Don't neglect him. After all, he's a distinguished guest. Then he nodded to Lu Laodao. Fellow Daoist, see you upstairs. After that he flung his sleeves and strode into the door. The little Daoist boy didn't say anything. He glared at Li Yunxin and quickly followed. A person of Xianxingzi's status. Of course he wouldn't argue with an ignorant kid here in public. Because he didn't expect that someone would dare to not give him face here. Seeing that they had left, Lu Laodao hurriedly pulled Li Yunxin to the side and whispered, Brother Exen, why? He knew that Li Yunxin had a clever heart. He also knew that Li Yunxin initially planned to live in seclusion in the city of Wei, and didn't want to cause too much trouble. But today he angered Xianxia on such an occasion. Lu Laodao wasn't worried that Brother Exen had no way to solve the problem, but he was afraid that the other party caused this trouble just for him. The people behind him saw that Laodao pulled the little Daoist boy to the side and whispered to him, and thought that it was to teach him a lesson. It was a moment of sharp-tongued venting. But everyone saw Xianxingzi's performance. He was definitely going to embarrass Lu Laodao upstairs. But Li Yunxin just smiled slightly. Don't panic. I'm playing a big game of chess. He just came over to ask for a beating. Besides, no one will step on me when I go upstairs. How can I happily show off? Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Author's note. If any of you think, how would the ancients understand the meaning of the word show off? Author, you're not following the script to show off. Then don't be anxious. The setting here is clear. As for why it is clear, it's not a forced setting. There are explanations. Chapter 77. Seeing Li Yunxin's expression, Lu Laodao realized that his brother Exen was plotting something again. He didn't have any ambition. He just followed Li Yunxin and got involved in a lot of troubles. But even until today he didn't feel regret. Instead he felt, well, it seemed to be good. Compared to the previous days he felt much better. So he was relieved. Then Laodao, what should I do? You just need to eat and drink properly. Li Yunxin said casually. Today I just showed my face. Oh, are those temple attendants around the city of Wei? How's the incense there? Laodao didn't know why his brother Exen cared about this. But he knew he couldn't keep up with his imagination, so he said, in fact, the incense is better than our temples, better than ours now. The people in the city of Wei are more knowledgeable. Their minds are more flexible and not sincere. But when we go to the villages outside, the folk customs are much simpler and the people are much more pious. Moreover, there's only one temple in dozens of miles. Although there are not as many people as in the city of Wei, there are fewer temples. So in this way, it's better than ours. That's not bad. Li Yunxin thought for a while. I've seen a few temples in the city. They're all clay sculptures. Many of the clay sculptures are just clay sculptures without any divine position. Are those also clay sculptures in those temples? Why don't they use portraits? At this time Xianxia walked over. Hearing his question, she was slightly stunned. She thought Lao Dao was teaching Li Yunxin a lesson. She had a good impression of this little Taoist boy. She felt that, although he got into trouble, he was really good to his master. So she wanted to speak up for him. But she found out that they were talking about this matter. But it didn't sound like a conversation between a master and a disciple. But she still couldn't help but say a few words. When you go upstairs, bear with it as much as you can. You're a filial child. But your master is in a difficult position. You can't be like this in the future. Li Yunxin didn't mind Xianxia's tone. It was a kind of advice from an elder, and it was all out of kindness. He only smiled and nodded. Yes. Xianxia was surprised again. This little Daoist was a little strange. At this moment he became calm and composed again. He was like a completely different person from before. What was going on with him? The manager of Qianghua Pavilion also came over and sighed. Taoist master, please follow me upstairs. Originally, when the steward confirmed that the invitation in Lao Dao's hands was correct, the Taoist priests felt honored. After all, they were of similar origins. However, after what happened before, they all felt that Lu Lao Dao was most likely going to suffer. Therefore, when she looked at him now, she could only sigh in her heart. However, Lu Lao Dao's face did not show much apprehension. Instead, he walked in front of the steward while talking to Li Yunxin. They were talking about what happened just now. Although most of the temple attendants are painters, only a few of them can draw decent paintings. Most of them draw something that calms the heart and calms the house. They are sold to pilgrims, but their effect is limited. As for drawing a portrait of the real deity in the temple like Brother Xian, it's unthinkable. If you have the ability to draw the Reiki of the deity, you don't need to be a temple attendant anymore. Oh. How about I draw for them? I trust Brother Xian's ability. Lao Dao listened to his words and paused. But it's hard to say about the others. That temple is the temple where they settle down. Some of the statues do have deities on them. If Brother Xian wants them to destroy the deity and replace it with a new one, probably only a few people can trust me, Lao Dao. But the others, I understand. Li Yunxin nodded. When we go upstairs, just answer whatever they ask you. I'll take care of everything. At this time, the two followed the steward through the lobby on the first floor and went to the second floor. In the past, when Lu Lao Dao came to Qianghua Tower and saw the jewels in the tower, he would look at them carefully and keep them as a topic of conversation in the future. But after hearing what Li Yunxin said, he suddenly panicked for no reason. He didn't know why, but he felt something was wrong. Brother Xian was still Brother Xian, but today, or recently, Brother Xian was not right. The old Daoist had a feeling that he might be doing something very big. So big that he might never see him again. When they stepped on the last step, the steward stepped aside and said, "Please come in. I'll lead you here." Lu Lao Dao stopped thinking and looked forward. The second floor of Qianghua Tower was very spacious. It was a complete lobby supported by only 2 rows of pillars in the middle. According to Li Yunxin's impression, it was very similar to the layout of the main hall of the Imperial Palace that he saw in movies and TV series. On the other side of the lobby, there was a huge gilded screen facing the entrance of the stairs. In front of the screen was the chair. The seat was naturally the table. The table in Qianghua Tower was actually quite old-fashioned, the separate dining system. In fact, this was also a more formal banquet system in the Daqing state. Everyone had a table in front of them, sat on their knees and drank several rounds of wine in a row. Seeing this scene, Lu Lao Dao showed a bitter face. He had never seen this kind of situation and he didn't know anything about etiquette. There were 13 seats in the lobby, the chair in the center and 6 seats on each side. Thinking of the steward saying that there were only 12 invitations, he guessed that they should be for the 12 people. But no one had taken the seats yet. There were 30 to 40 people in the lobby. They were chatting casually in twos and threes as if they were waiting for the host. This scene was familiar to Li Yunxin. If everyone had a glass of wine in their hands, he would feel that this was more like the upper-class gatherings in his world. The people in the hall only glanced at them for a while, then turned their faces away and ignored them. Li Yunxin smiled. We also ignore them. He knew that it must be the Daoist apprentice of Xuanqing who came in and said something. In fact, among these people just a few words were enough to exclude the old Daoist and himself. They were not in the same circle to begin with. Since they ignored them, he was not in a hurry. He walked to the window with Lu Laodao. Beside the window of Qianghua Tower was a fence that looked like a gazebo. There were seats and small tables. There were some cold fruits on the small tables. They were yellow, green, red, purple and purple. It was very beautiful. The two of them sat down and rested here, watching the people in the hall talk loudly. The Daoist apprentice of Xuanqing had been looking for an opportunity to meet Li Yunxin's eyes, so that he could express to him, "Just wait and see. I'll teach you a lesson later." Unfortunately, Li Yunxin had long since passed the age of arguing with a teenager. He only glanced at the layout of the lobby and then thought about his own matters. At first he thought that Yin Pingji had set up an overt plot for him. But just now, when he was outside the building, he knew that this was not something that Yin Pingji could do. Then the others would not target Lu Laodao but himself. Someone had brought him here. Through Yin Pingji he had fallen into the wrong thinking and lowered his guard. This person was very clever. As Li Yunxin thought about it, he slowly looked at the crowd. Who could it be? He actually made him suffer a small loss. Chapter 78. But after looking at it for a while, Li Yunxin was stunned when he accidentally met the eyes of the little Taoist boy. Just now, when they were downstairs, Shirquizi said that they received the invitation yesterday and hurried over, only arriving today. 10 kilometers was not a short distance in this era. The person who sent the invitation must have left earlier. If they had ridden horses or taken ox carts, they should have left yesterday morning. So the decision of Ling Kongzi inviting them to the meeting should have been made by him yesterday. That was to say, Ling Kongzi had already arrived in the city of Wei before meeting him yesterday. Yin Pingji couldn't get one of the 12 high-level invitations. So, it was made by Ling Kongzi. It was not a coincidence that the woman went to the Qiao family to see him yesterday. Li Yunxin was stunned and the little Taoist boy became complacent. He thought that Li Yunxin talked back to him before because he didn't know who he was. Now seeing him here, the little Taoist boy was shocked. He thought that he shouldn't dress too low-key when he went out. Today a powerful person was coming and he didn't know what that person would wear, so he dressed like this. If he went out in luxurious clothes, the guy by the window probably wouldn't dare to say a word. But he couldn't let them go because of this. The little Taoist boy smiled at Li Yunxin insidiously and pointed at him. This idiot. Li Yunxin turned his eyes away and continued to think about his own things. There were probably two reasons why the first disciple of the Langya Cave Heaven paid attention to him. One was the death of the 3 swordsmen of the Lingshu sword sect. The 2 cultivators in the city of Wei were idiots, but it didn't mean that all the cultivators in the world were idiots. It was reasonable for Ling Kongzi to suspect him. After seeing what he did in the Qiao family that day, his suspicion could almost be confirmed. But he didn't make a move and behaved politely. The other thing was, it was the Jade Slip of Enlightenment. If it was because of the Jade Slip of Enlightenment, it would be even worse. In fact, if either of these two things were confirmed, it would be a matter of life and death. However, as Li Yunxin sat by the window and deduced these two thoughts, he smiled instead. Lu Laodao was carefully picking the fruits from the corners of the fruit platter to eat. He didn't want to look too ugly and ruin the decorations. At this time, when he inadvertently looked at Li Yunxin, he found that his brother Exin had a strange smile on his face. This was the second time he saw Li Yunxin's unusual smile today. But this time it wasn't a warm smile, but, after all, Lu Laodao did not have much experience. But if it was a scoundrel who mingled in the streets all year round, he would find the smile on Li Yunxin's face to be quite familiar. It was the dangerous and excited smile of a skilled gambler who was faced with an unavoidable gamble. At this time, Ling Kongzi stopped at the back street of the Jade Flower Pavilion and said to Song Yunzi, "You don't have to come today." Lao Dao of the Pill Cauldron sect of the Shangqing sect froze. "Fairy, what do you mean?" "I came here to do two things." Ling Kongzi raised his head slightly and looked at the second floor. "One of them is to investigate the deaths of the 3 swordsmen of the Ling Su sword sect. The death of 3 swordsmen in the mortal world is not a small matter. Before I came here I met the sword sage. The sword sage knew that I was going to travel, so he gave me some instructions." "You met the sages?" Song Yunzi's eyes widened. Because no one had seen the 2 sages for almost 100 years. However, Ling Kongzi didn't answer this meaningless question. "I was investigating you in Penanzi before. But now I don't think you did it. You're not smart enough. So, you don't have to come to the Baohua Guild to avoid delaying my business." Song Yunzi didn't know if he should be happy or sad after hearing this. He hesitated for a while and said, "Fairy, what about the other thing you did?" Ling Kongzi narrowed his eyes and looked at the second floor. "Killing demons." After saying this she paused and added, "The remnants of the art sage." Song Yunzi frowned slightly. Oh, you don't know about the art sage?" Ling Kongzi nodded. "Do you want to know?" Song Yunzi was stunned for a while. However, Ling Kongzi didn't seem to be asking for his opinion. "You only know about the 2 sages, but you don't know about the 3 sages. 2,000 years. It's long enough for you to forget everything. Then you should know about Daoist Danqing. Daoist Danqing's cultivation method is different from Daotong and Kenzo, but it's the heavenly heart dharma. Aren't you curious about it? That's a well-organized, systematic and solid cultivation method, but there's no higher, transcendent cultivation method. Don't you think it's strange? Because in the past, other than Daotong and Kenzo, there was also the painting sect. The Grand Master of the painting sect was called the Art Sage. Unfortunately, the Art Sage became a demon and was killed by the Daoists, the 2 sages and other cultivators. The remaining Daoist Danqing used to be the disciples of the Art Sage. Look at the painters in the market. Now that they worship the 2 saints, they feel that the mediocre techniques they cultivate are just leftovers left by the cultivators of the orthodoxies and sword sections. But they don't know that those are the remaining cultivation methods of the painting sect, passed down by the art sage who was killed by the 2 sages. I shouldn't be called the art sage. It's the art demon. I'm here to kill the demon. Do you understand now? Song Yunzi was dumbfounded. This was because Ling Kongzi had just poured out all these secrets of the past that were related to the 2 saints to him just like that. He didn't want to hear it at all. There must be a reason why no one knew about these things for thousands of years. But now he knew everything. Song Yunzi spaced out for a while and suddenly felt a chill. "Fairy, are you saying that the demon you want to kill this time is also at the Baohua gathering?" "Fairy, what do you want me to do by telling me all this?" "You can't do anything. Your level is too low and your brain is not smart enough," Ling Kongzi said as she walked. "Go back. I'm telling you, but I'm too annoyed to keep these things in my heart. It's better to say it out. Now you know, if I accidentally tell others I'm also a demon, I'll kill them all." After saying this, she took a few more steps and walked up to the sky, as if there was a row of invisible steps in the air. After a dozen more steps, she arrived at the 2nd floor of Cheonghua Building, behind the gilded screen. She stopped and looked at the people through the gap of the screen, then at Li Yunxin. "How did you do it?" She looked for a while and suddenly tilted her head slightly. She said in a low voice, "Interesting." Chapter 79. Behind the gold-plated screen was a large soft couch. Usually when one was tired from banquets, they could come here to rest, or when they were in the mood to laugh with the dancers. Ling Kongzi looked at Li Yunxin for a while, then turned to look at the soft couch as if he wanted to rest on it. But he seemed to have thought of something or seen something and he frowned slightly. At this time the voices in the front hall suddenly grew louder. The originally small chatter turned into a wave of greetings and compliments. One of the leaders of today's Baohua gathering, Great Master Pei Juzi, had arrived. Lu Laodao also hurriedly got up. Li Yunxin was still leaning against the railing by the window. In any case, his identity today was that of a little Daoist boy. With so many people here, no one would pay attention to him. What's more, when Great Master Pei Juzi and his group came up, there was a group of wild Daoists following behind them. The main character had arrived so they could also take the stage. But in the end there was still a difference in status. Originally, these tables by the window with plates of melons and fruits were prepared for these people. Li Yunxin narrowed his eyes slightly as he looked at Pei Juzi. He originally wasn't interested in Pei Juzi. He only glanced at him out of instinct. But after this glance he couldn't move his eyes away. This person, something was wrong. Everyone had their own characteristics and unique hobbies, no matter how unconventional they were. It wasn't that the big shots always had a high and mighty face, and the poor always had a submissive appearance. But this Pei Juzi in front of him, Li Yunxin felt extremely strange. Looking at his clothing, skin color and appearance, he was indeed a person who lived in luxury. But looking at his expression, it was quite awkward. Others might not dare to stare at him out of respect or fear. But Li Yunxin found that he was actually pretending to be reserved. He seemed to be trying his best to keep a straight face and not smile. But his eyes were wandering and his body language was saying, "Is there anything fun? Delicious food? Why is it different from what I imagined? What's going on?" Li Yunxin made a soft sound of surprise and sat up straight. Today was more fun than he had imagined. It was also at this time that the sky slowly darkened. Looking out of the window, one could see that the setting sun had been shrouded by thick clouds. A thick layer of burning clouds appeared in the western sky. But as the clouds became thicker and thicker, even the light of the sunset disappeared. Night arrived an hour earlier than usual. However, the banquet had already been prepared and the candles were already prepared. The servants quickly filed in, lit the candles in the hall and covered the hall with a windproof cover. Although the eaves of the Jade Flower building were cleverly designed so that normal wind and rain couldn't blow through the windows, it was difficult for the wind and rain to blow in. But seeing the dark clouds looming over the city tonight, a steward still asked if the thick curtain should be lowered. Qianghua building was located in the center of the city of Wei. The lights of the city of Wei, seen from upstairs at night, was also one of the 8 famous local sceneries. At least the boss of Qianghua building hoped that Master Pei Juzi would like to see it and mention it after returning to the capital. The group of people looked out the window, eagerly offering advice to Grandmaster. But most of them suggested to lower the curtain to prevent Grandmaster's precious body from catching a cold. However, at this moment, a not loud voice suddenly came into everyone's ears in the midst of the noise. The dark clouds looming over the city are about to destroy the city, and the storm is coming. This is the perfect time. No need. Then the person who spoke walked out from behind the screen, walked to the chair and knelt down. "Where is the fisherman fishing, old man? Bring it to me." After a short panic that lasted no more than 3 or 4 seconds, the entire hall became silent. All the bigwigs present should know who this plainly dressed woman was. Their servants might not know, but those who could follow them today were all clever people, so they didn't dare to make a sound. Everyone moved their eyes away from Pei Juzi and looked at the woman in white. After a few seconds, a steward next to Pei Juzi said, "I wonder when Fairy Ling Kong will come. Fairy Ling Kong is really good at Taoism, good at Taoism." With this flattery, everyone came to a sudden realization and they all chimed in. However, these echoes were done carefully. When they praised Pei Juzi, they used as much force as they could. Even if Grandmaster Pei Juzi was a descendant of a noble family, he was still a mortal. Mortals couldn't escape the emotions of mortals. These people were all smart people, so they could easily deal with Pei Juezi. But facing this fairy Ling Kong again, they felt powerless. High-level cultivators might find it hard to treat these people of the mortal world as their own, and the people of the mortal world would find it hard to treat them as their own. Even though it was vulgar, the most direct example was that when cultivators reached the transcendent state, their bodies would gradually break away from the category of traditional humans. Slowly, even if they ate and drank, they wouldn't even have excretion. Their extremely powerful physiological functions would absorb and resist everything. It was just that they looked like humans in a certain sense. Facing such a Ling Kongzi and a woman at that, after a storm of careful praise, they didn't know what to say. Originally, they were supposed to come first and wait for the important person to appear. Pei Juezi came, everyone chatted for a while, then sat down and waited for Fairy Ling Kong to arrive. When a master from Daotong arrived, according to the etiquette, masters had a long lifespan, so they followed the ancient etiquette. They led the master to a seat, then bowed to each other, asked the ceremonial officer to serve food and drink, responded with some words, and then Grandmaster Pei Juezi presented the painting. But now, everything was messed up. Ling Kongzi laughed lightly. Of course, I walked out from behind the screen. Which one is this Pei Juezi? Where is the painting? At this time, Li Yunxin also asked Lu Laodao in a low voice. Dark clouds looming over the city, the storm is coming. Have you heard of these 2 lines? Which poet wrote it? Laodao was staring at the majestic fairy Ling Kong and was a bit dazed for a moment. When Li Yunxin asked again, he came back to his senses, thought carefully, and said in a low voice, Brother Xian said it well. These 2 lines. Although they don't match, the tone is also wrong. But they are both wonderful lines. Laodao, I have never heard of them. These lines should be written by a fairy, right? She chose 2 lines from her usual poems and recited them casually. If it was written by someone else, just based on these 2 lines, the whole world would know. But you have never heard of these 2 lines? Li Yunxin nodded meaningfully. Well, Laodao had never heard of these 2 lines. Although Lu Laodao was not a scholar, since he was a painter, he was not an ignorant person. This meant that these 2 lines originally did not exist in this world. He knew these 2 lines. That person, that painting saint, should also know these 2 lines. It was very likely that he had said these 2 lines in the past. Similarly, because Lu Laodao had never heard of these 2 lines, it meant that these 2 lines were only circulated in an extremely small circle of cultivators. Otherwise, according to Lu Laodao, once these 2 lines were circulated in the secular world, the world would already know of these 2 lines. Among cultivators, there was an extremely small circle related to the painting saint. Ling Kongzi said these 2 lines, which meant that she was in that circle. This meant that she might know of the painting saint's secret. This meant that she might know of the Jade Scroll of Enlightenment. This meant that she might have come for the Jade Scroll of Enlightenment. This woman, he could not stay. Chapter 80. The first drop of rain hit the wooden railing, creating a patch of water. The wind became stronger. The strong wind blew the gauze curtains, making them flutter. The hall that was supposed to be filled with fluttering clothes and gauze curtains was now filled with a murderous aura. After one breath, the heavy rain fell like crazy, and the world was filled with water vapor. In the strong wind, the flying gauze, and the pouring rain, Ling Kongzi sat upright in front of the table, with a calm and gentle expression on his face, and his clothes didn't move at all. She said not to put up a curtain, so no one dared to put it up. The strong wind rushed in through the window, carrying raindrops with it, and everyone's clothes were blown through. The might of the heavens and the earth combined with the imposing aura on Ling Kongzi's body caused practically everyone to hold their breaths. Some people even wondered if this storm was summoned by this fairy. The might of an immortal was not something mortals could fathom. A few seconds after she said that, the steward next to Pei Juzi wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and gently pulled on the corner of his master's clothes. Tonight the steward felt like he was going crazy. He didn't know if his master was scared, but he didn't seem right the whole day. Normally, no matter how high his status was in the secular world, no matter how good his family background was, in front of the first disciple of the heavenly paradise, he shouldn't act pretentiously. Was the status of the royal family high? But it was said that the royal family of the previous dynasty angered a master of the heavenly paradise, and at the same time, lost the favor of the Dao Tong and Kenzo. Thus, the first emperor of the Daqing state revolted and killed the royal family of the previous dynasty. No cultivator intervened. But now his master seemed to have become stupid. That fairy Ling Kong had said twice that she wanted to see the painting. He still stood in the same place, and just like before, his eyeballs were rolling. No one knew what he was thinking. Until the steward pulled again and almost everyone was urging him with their eyes. He seemed to wake up from a dream and untied the cloth bag on his waist. Then without the slightest scruple he pulled out the painting, walked over to Ling Kongzi's table and placed the painting on it. Then like a puppet he retreated a few steps back to the steward's side. His series of actions caused everyone present to break out in cold sweat. This was the first time they had seen Pei Juzi. They had never thought that this expert who was about to take over the position of the Imperial House Great Painter would have this kind of conduct and personality. Her wild and uninhibited and careless temperament could be used by any one of them here, but who dared to be like Fairy Ling Kong? Cultivators were naturally temperamental. No one would be surprised if Ling Kongzi were to fly into a rage and kill Pei Juzi in the next moment. Fortunately, the white fairy didn't seem to want to do that. She raised her head to look at Pei Juzi. Her gaze paused briefly on him before returning to the painting. Then he slowly unrolled the painting on the table and continued to sit there attentively, looking at the painting. At this moment, everyone realized. There was no singing or dancing, no small talk, no etiquette. The Baohua gathering had already begun. Perhaps this was how cultivators did things. This was simple and direct. The fisherman fishing the old was a rare painting. Most of the people present had a rare chance to see it. Thus, even those who were afraid of Ling Kongzi's, unfathomable and temperamental, stretched their necks to look more closely. The four painters could see some things but not enough. As for the ordinary people, they could only look at the painting and the feelings it gave them. Lu Laodao was so anxious that his eyes widened, because a group of people were slowly moving over and blocking the painting. After a while there would probably be people holding the painting and letting the wild Daoists by the window take a look from afar, but how could it compare to seeing it up close? Li Yunxin smiled and patted his arm. Go over and look. You're in the 12 seats, what are you afraid of? At this time the people in front covered Ling Kongzi's figure, and the wild Daoists by the window also dared to talk in low voices. Only then did they shiver and greet each other in the howling wind and rain. Shirkuizi crossed her arms and moved to Lu Laodao's side. Go. When you see it, come back and tell us. When Li Yunxin spoke, Laodao hesitated slightly, but when Shirkuizi urged him he no longer hesitated. He stood up and swept his gaze over the Daoists around him. He smoothed his beard and said, Okay, I'll go now, I'll go now. No matter why he was invited, at least at this moment he felt that he had gained face in front of his fellow Daoists. When Lu Laodao left, Li Yunxin's smile disappeared and he stared at Pei Juzi again. He had originally come for the fisherman fishing the old. But when he looked he found something even more interesting. That Pei Juzi wasn't human. At first he only felt that his expression was strange. But ever since the thunder rumbled in the sky and the rain poured down, Pei Juzi's expression became dull. Li Yunxin felt that this dullness was because he was trying to focus on dealing with something, fighting against some kind of power. That was why he became like this. He was trying his best, and even at a certain moment, Li Yunxin saw something burrow out of his body. It looked like a leg with thick black hair. But only for a moment, it shrank back as if it was electrocuted. This Pei Juzi, he wasn't the original Pei Juzi. What he saw was that the thing that possessed his body because it was trying too hard to fight against some kind of power, almost came out of its body. The most reasonable explanation was that it was fighting against Ling Kongzi. But when Li Yunxin looked at Ling Kongzi, he felt that this woman didn't notice the abnormality of the great painter. This was also very strange. She was a cultivator at the peak of transcendent state, but she couldn't see through a ghost that possessed her body? Li Yunxin tried to close his eyes and only use his spirit energy to sense. The result was a real shock. Indeed, he couldn't sense the ghost qi. This thing had some tricks up its sleeves. Then it was probably fighting against some kind of power from another existence. He opened his eyes and glanced at the dark clouds outside the window. Interesting. Tonight there would be a parade of demons and ghosts. The people of high status had all gone to look at the paintings, and their attendants had retreated to the window, waiting for the host to start the banquet. The little Daoist boy who had been taught a lesson by Li Yunxin outside the building walked over, trembling. He purposely moved closer to Li Yunxin and looked at him with a proud expression. You still have the mood to sit. Do you know what will happen later? Li Yunxin was thinking about something and made some last-minute changes to his plan, so he answered casually, I don't know. The little Daoist boy saw that he was a little dazed and thought that he was distracted by tonight's scene, so he became even more proud. Then do you want to know? Li Yunxin rolled his eyes, annoyed that the boy was interrupting his thoughts. No. The little Daoist boy was stunned and then he became angry. Hey, you are so stubborn. Let me tell you, in a while my master will ask your master to give the painting to the Immortal. You know what your master is capable of, it must be very crude. Hey, at that time my master will say that your master is disrespectful to the Immortal. Since he is one of the 12 masters, how can he be so weak? Of course he didn't do his best. At that time, no matter whether the Immortal is angry or not, the governor and the governor who are sitting with him will definitely be angry. Just you do. Chapter 81. Li Yunxin stood up, sighed slightly and gave him a slap on the face. He had already carefully controlled his strength to prevent himself from slapping him to death and causing more trouble. He only wanted to interrupt him so that he could think properly. But even so, the little Daoist boy still made a sound. He spun around dizzily and fell to the ground with a thud. The wild Daoists around widened their eyes as they watched this scene. Li Yunxin sat down again and thought about his plan. This sound alarmed the few big shots in front of him. They frowned slightly and turned around to look. They saw the little Daoist boy crawling up from the ground with his hands and feet. He spun around and covered his face as he looked for someone to look at. But when he saw their eyes, he quickly stood up straight and put down his hands. What's wrong? Xianxia scolded him in a low voice. I am in a storm. The little Daoist boy gritted his teeth and pursed his lips. He was so angry that he was about to cry. I fell myself. Xianxia glared at him, then looked at Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin smiled at him. Then he mouthed, hit me. Xianxia's face instantly turned red. He turned his head away hatefully. Xianxia hurriedly tugged at Li Yunxin's sleeve. You child, she said in a low voice. You child, why are you so? Auntie, you also know that naughty children are difficult to manage. Li Yunxin looked at her and sighed. He's very annoying with his nagging. I don't want to argue with naughty children and I don't want to hit him. But if I persuade him, he will use his rich experience to defeat me. What else can I do? Xianxia also sighed. Sigh. But you made things difficult for your master. You are a good child, but what he said just now, although he might not do it, he will still make things difficult for you in the future. Li Yunxin smiled and shook his head. You are wrong. What he said just now, it's not that he might not do it, but he will definitely do it. You are a kind person and you may not think badly of others. But those people like to go to the extreme, especially when they are dealing with people who are not on the same level as them. For example, I won't persuade the naughty child to stop babbling. I'll just slap him in the face and interrupt him. Simple violence. As for them, they won't teach us a lesson or teach us a lesson. Killing people like us is as easy as crushing an ant. So it won't be difficult for them to simply crush us. Why would they bother to think about other things? Either I don't care about you at all or I'm going to take extreme measures. That's how I and the rest of them are. Neither of them are good people and we know each other very well. He had already thought of some things, so he was in the mood to chat with Xianxia. Xianxia heard his words and so did the people nearby. The young Daoist covered his face and walked over hatefully. He also heard the last few sentences. For a moment they were a little surprised. Hunyuanzi's little Daoist boy could actually say such words. It wasn't something he could say at all. Xianxingzi's little Daoist boy gritted his teeth and held back his tears. He pointed at him and said with a trembling voice, "Good, good, good. It's good that you know." You, Li Yunxin acted as if he was introducing him. He stretched out his palm and said, "Auntie, look. Just like this. He's such an old child and he doesn't have any sense of right or wrong. He can be the most ruthless and he can also be the most ruthless. Sometimes school bullying, oh, you don't know what it means, is done at this age. Just like today he did it or wanted to do it, but no one can stop him or punish him. There's no fair environment. What should he do? Then kill him." Li Yunxin turned to the little Daoist boy. "For example, this little bastard, a disobedient child who likes to harm others. What should we do? Just beat him to death. Then you see, you and your master planned to kill us and now I'm not happy. So I plan to kill you and your master later. Let's make a bet. Do you dare to bet?" As Li Yunxin spoke, his whole body exuded a murderous aura. The murderous aura and killing intent of ordinary people was a kind of force. But the murderous aura, emitted by people like him, actually contained some spiritual energy. He was really, really afraid of people. When the little Daoist boy saw the look in his eyes, he finally felt a little afraid. He stretched out his hand but couldn't say anything. He only said, you, a few times in a trembling voice and then hurriedly walked to the side. Li Yunxin then sat down with a normal expression. This time, Xianxia only looked at him and didn't say anything. The wild Daoist boy beside him also didn't say anything. Although he had only cultivated some minor techniques, he could more or less feel some spiritual power. So they all felt the real murderous aura from Li Yunxin. It was also at this time that they realized that this little Daoist boy, who looked different from the others, might not just be a Daoist boy. Li Yunxin thought about it and smiled at Xianxia. "All right. Let's say it. In fact, I'm not Hunyuanzi's Daoist boy. I originally planned to stay in the city of Wei for a few more days, but it seems that I can't stay for a few days. But I have a good impression of Lao Dao. So I'm more afraid that after I leave someone will cause trouble for Lao Dao. For example, that Xianxia, I touched him once outside the building and just now I touched him again. In fact, I did it on purpose. I purposely wanted him to go against me so that it would be convenient for me to do something later. But in this way he will hate Lao Dao. Then for the sake of Lao Dao's future I probably have to kill him. Otherwise it will be very troublesome." To deal with these people I have to beat them until they are convinced. Otherwise there will be endless troubles in the future. Hearing his words, the others were even more dumbfounded. Xianxia was a woman, so her psychological endurance was probably slightly stronger. After being dumbfounded, she slowly thought about his words and then frowned. "Let's not talk about whether what you said is true or false. But your reason, your words don't make sense. You said that you provoked that Xianxia to make things convenient for yourself." Xianxia frowned and slowly organized her words. "Then you were unreasonable first. But now that you've used him, you said that you were afraid that he would not stop pestering you, so you wanted to kill him. Your reason? Are you bullying me?" Li Yunxin suddenly laughed. You are after all the woman that my teacher likes. You have good values and I also like you very much. That's right, I'm bullying people. But he has no choice. Auntie, in the future you have to remember one thing. Don't reason with evil people. Unless the environment you are in can support you to reason with evil people. A good person will not want to kill me because of such a small matter. So he is not a good person. Then his death is not to be regretted. Xianxia finally couldn't help saying, then didn't you want to kill him because of these things? Li Yunxin smiled and winked at her. So, I am also not a good person. But since you are the woman that my teacher likes, I will give them a chance for your sake. If they don't court death later, then they won't die, all right. Chapter 82. As he said this, he was standing by the window with the wind and rain behind him. The candlelight in Xianxia restaurant was dim. His sleeves were fluttering in the wind. A flash of lightning suddenly flashed in the sky. His entire person was black and white like the background. At this moment, Xianxia suddenly felt that Li Yunxin did not look like a human. He looked more like a demon. It was also because of this bolt of lightning and the words he had just said, "I'll kill you when I'm done." Xianxia suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. Sitting by the window and feeling the wind made her cold, but this cold came from her bones. Explaining these words to them now, was he going to make use of them too? He wouldn't even let a young man go. But this thought only appeared for a moment before it was interrupted by Ling Kongzi's voice. "Ah, this is a treasure of the secular world. Oh, not bad." Ling Kongzi looked at the painting for a while and then sat up straight. Once she stood up, the others didn't dare to look anymore. Although they only saw a little bit and didn't understand the true meaning, they could only leave. The steward beside Page Yuezi pulled the master to sit next to Ling Kongzi, and the others took their seats. When everyone was seated, Lu Laodao found his seat. He looked a little uneasy and even reached out to wipe the sweat off his forehead. His seat was at the end, which was reasonable. However, what made him feel very uncomfortable was that he was being stared at by almost everyone. Xianxia stared at him, of course. The others also cast a few glances at him. Not to mention those wild Daoists by the window. They all had different expressions. When the master sat down, the servant walked over and served him. The little Taoist boy ran to Xianxia's side and whispered something. He looked a little hesitant. No matter how arrogant he was still a young man and was easily influenced. At this moment he was a little worried about Li Yunxin's harsh words. But when Xianxia heard this, his originally gloomy face suddenly broke into a faint smile. He glanced in the direction of Li Yunxin, then turned away from Lu Laodao and started chatting cheerfully with the prefectural magistrate sitting next to him. Li Yunxin understood that this was because in the eyes of the artistic conception great painter, she and Lu Daoist were already dead. It wasn't worth any more attention. The storm was still raging. No one knew what was wrong with Page Yuezi today, but someone had to liven up the atmosphere. Xianxia had something on his mind and his status was high enough. It was appropriate for his status to be in between the Daoist and the secular world, so he was duty-bound. He cleared his throat and said, "I've also admired this fisherman fishing old man painting. It's an eye-opener for us. Fairy Ling Kong comes from an immortal sect, so her vision is naturally higher than us mortals. To be able to receive the word, 'not bad,' from the fairy's mouth is already a blessing of 3 lifetimes. The others clapped their hands in agreement. Ling Kongzi's face was expressionless. He only nodded slightly. But this kind of attitude made everyone feel relaxed and happy. The scene gradually became lively. Someone else suggested composing a poem to record this event, and others agreed. The officials were all scholars and naturally loved this kind of thing. They were interested and said they wanted to write. Ling Kongzi watched them play for a while and then looked at Li Yunxin. He found that he was talking to Lu Laodao about something. The expression on the old man's face changed. It was impossible to tell what he was feeling. After the officials recorded a few poems, Ling Kongzi said, "The storm is a bit strong." Everyone was staring at the fairy's expression from beginning to end. Hearing her speak again, they hurriedly said, "Yes, the storm is a bit strong. We should have a banquet and drink some wine to warm our bodies. Fairy Ling Kong is a cultivator. Do you drink wine?" "There's no need for a banquet. I don't like those." As Ling Kongzi said that, he glanced at the cultivators by the window. Then he said, "You guys are also suffering from the cold, take a rest." Saying so, he raised his hand and pressed it down. Just as everyone was about to carefully understand what Ling Kongzi meant by take a rest, they suddenly found that the entire world had become silent. Their ears were filled with the sound of wind and rain, and their bodies were buffeted by the moist wind. After Ling Kongzi finished speaking these words, the sound of wind and rain suddenly vanished. The wind also disappeared. The storm outside was still pouring, but no matter what, it couldn't enter the hall. After a moment of surprise, the hall was filled with praises. Most of these praises were sincere. The wild cultivators didn't think that Fairy Ling Kong would care about their feelings and used her thaumaturgy to stop the wind and rain. She was truly merciful. But only Li Yunxin let out a soft cry of surprise. When Xianxia mentioned the banquet, Ling Kongzi subconsciously glanced at the window. Li Yunxin felt that if his previous experience wasn't wrong, this was a related reaction. Because of the banquet, she looked at the window. There were two things by the window, one was a person and the other was a fruit in front of the person. Li Yunxin couldn't clearly see the expression on Ling Kongzi's face, but he could see her neck. Her real face should be extremely fair. Because the skin on her neck was white and delicate, without a single wrinkle or spot. Just now, the two sides of her smooth, snow-white neck slightly tightened. It was an extremely imperceptible swallowing movement. But just after that movement, it was forcefully suppressed. This might be Li Yunxin's illusion. But the tone of her voice after that was slightly lower, and she made a gesture to suppress it. When these three things were combined, it was very obvious that this Ling Kongzi was subconsciously suppressing her strong desire. And she stopped the wind and rain just to explain her looking at the window action. She didn't need to show off like a secular person. If she really wanted to, why did she wait until now to pay attention to those cultivators who were suffering from the wind and cold? This Ling Kongzi, she lied. It wasn't that she didn't like the banquet, but she couldn't for some reason. Her performance was extraordinary and she was definitely a cultivator different from mortals, but she actually told a small lie about this issue. So her image in Li Yunxin's mind became clearer. The wind in the hall disappeared and Ling Kongzi said again, "Today I came to the Baohua gathering for another matter." At this point she straightened her upper body and glanced at the people in the hall. "I want to go through the tribulation of killing." As soon as she said this, everyone's reaction was interesting. But at the same time, it also made Li Yunxin a little shocked. Except for Pei Juezi and Lu Laodao, the expressions of the other 9 people changed slightly, and their emotions were extremely complicated. With just a glance he realized. The people in the upper class of the city of Wei all knew. They all knew that the swordsmen of the Lingshu sword sect kidnapped people, killed people and went through the tribulation. Chapter 83. For a moment, they were afraid that Ling Kongzi was going to kill them to pass the heavenly tribulation. But then they realized that it was not possible, and they were worried that Ling Kongzi wanted them to find someone for her. That would be troublesome. Ling Kongzi also saw their expressions. At this moment she finally smiled and said, "Are you afraid that I will kill someone?" "I won't." She ignored their shocked expressions and said, "Passing the heavenly tribulation by killing people is a stupid thing to do. After all, it's not that you have cut off the desire in your heart, but that you have to rely on external forces to solve the problem. Maybe you can reach the transcendent state that way, but if you want to go further, you will not be able to fool yourself. Some people feel tired of killing and don't want to kill anymore. That is the heavenly tribulation. But the real heavenly tribulation is not because you are tired of killing, but because you have let go of it. You are tired of it and you don't want to touch it even if you want to. In essence, you care about it. And if you let go of it, you don't care about it. If you want to pick it up, you can pick it up. If you pick it up, you can put it down again. Then you have passed the heavenly tribulation. Unfortunately, among all the heavenly tribulations, the heavenly tribulation is the hardest to pass. I have studied the treasure scroll in my sect, but I was still lacking a little bit of understanding. Just this little bit of understanding made me unable to pass the heavenly tribulation for 3 years. Fellow Daoists in the city of Wei may not be as good as you want in terms of cultivation, but the things you have experienced and the feelings you have experienced must be unique. Today there are a total of 36 painters here with different levels of cultivation. But no matter how high or low, I want you to paint one for me. If one of them helps me, I will teach you a chi refinement mantra of the Langya cave as a token of appreciation. There was silence at first and then there was an uproar. This was a heavenly blessing. What Taoist Ling Kong meant was that she did not care whether it was a treasure scroll, a rare scroll, a famous scroll, or a masterpiece, or just a painting with a little bit of spiritual chi in it. What she wanted was just a little bit of understanding. Indeed, every single person present had a chance. In front of such a blessing, the 4 painters of artistic conception couldn't hold back anymore. Dignity and modesty were always used at the right time. If he was still reserved at this time, he would be a true idiot. Xianxia coughed and said, "Fairy Ling Kong's great blessing is really. I've really received your kindness. The bearing of an immortal. I, Xianxia, have lived for so long, and today I have witnessed the bearing and mercy of an immortal." When he said this, everyone nodded in agreement. Since Fairy Ling Kong is like this, we must not let her down. He restrained his expression and said solemnly, "Everyone here is a fellow Daoist. We are all aware of each other's realms. On this banquet, there are 5 painters of artistic conception from the city of Wei, including Lao Dao. Although the rest of you have not reached the state, you are all the masters of a monastery. You all have some skills. These fellow Daoists have indeed put in a lot of effort to create a masterpiece. Even if he didn't, you don't have to be too harsh on him. After all, he has been busy with worldly affairs all year round, and tonight is a stormy night. It's understandable that he didn't have enough strength." These words were well said, and the wild Daoists all nodded. Those at the peak of artistic conception could create a masterpiece, but how many people could do it? The 4 painters of artistic conception could only create 2 or 3 paintings in their lives, and they were already famous in the city of Wei. As for these wild Daoists, many of them couldn't even get close to a masterpiece. After all, they relied on incense money and the money from selling paintings to make a living, just like Lu Laodao in the past. After saying this, several people at the banquet praised Xianxia for being fair. Then he changed the topic. "As for the 5 of us, I'm not afraid that you will laugh at us, but we have been famous in the city of Wei for a long time. Everyone here who hasn't heard of the 5 painters of artistic conception in the city of Wei, to be able to attend this banquet today is the result of our fellow Daoists' appreciation." The people at the banquet smiled and nodded with different expressions. The wild Daoists were slightly silent. "Then the 5 of us must work hard. Fairy Ling Kong has comprehended the treasure scroll, so we can't do it. As for the famous scroll, it depends on fate. But if the 5 of us can't make a masterpiece, Fairy, even if you don't blame us, we won't let it go easily. The prefectural magistrate and the prefectural magistrate are also here today. Today's Baohua gathering and Fairy Dongtian's blessing will be a big event that will be recorded in the prefectural history. Such a big event, who dares not to do their best? Even I won't let him go. Since the beginning of the banquet, the prefectural magistrate of the city of Wei, who had been serious in speech and manner, finally spoke. The highest official in the city of Wei, who had administrative, military and judicial powers in one body, spoke. Xianxia nodded and finished the banquet with satisfaction. The little Daoist boy beside him glanced at Li Yunxin. Even the slowest person would know what was going to happen. Xianxia didn't know what she was feeling at the moment. Thought, was it really like this? That kid was right. But she wasn't sure whether she should worry about Lu Laodao or others. She saw Li Yunxin whispering to Laodao. She didn't know what they said. But Lu Laodao didn't panic. At least he didn't look panicked. Instead, Li Yunxin turned his head and smiled at her helplessly. Xianxia understood what he meant. Look, they're starting to court death. But she didn't know how Li Yunxin could do it. Xianxia and the others at the banquet were all on good terms. They laid the groundwork bit by bit, forcing Laodao and him into a corner. Maybe the two of them could make a masterpiece and escape this disaster. But, kill them? She couldn't think of how Li Yunxin would do it. How to turn the situation around bit by bit and achieve that point. After the prefectural magistrate spoke, the atmosphere in the hall became a little somber. Xianxia said again, serve the brush and ink. But when painters painted, they all had their own tools, so it wasn't good to change tools randomly. Because when one thing was used for a long time, it would become handy, and it would be easier to inject spiritual aura into it. The wild Taoists came to the banquet, but in fact not many of them would think of such a thing, so not many of them brought their painting tools. As for Lu Laodao, he couldn't paint out of thin air, and he knew that his brother Exen was by his side, so he wouldn't bring his painting tools. In the end, most of the painters in the secular world treated painting as a way to make a living. And the painting Taoists treated it as a way to cultivate and save their lives. Therefore, like the Taoists and the swordsmen, their painting tools were always with them like magic tools. After all, the four painters of artistic conception had cultivated to the artistic conception level, so they could be regarded as the top figures in the secular world. They also had servants by their side, so the painting tools were handed over to the servants. When he gave the order, the servants would serve the tools to their masters. As for the wild Taoists, the servants of Qianghua building walked to the front, took the fruit platter, and served them the brush and ink prepared by the building. In such a place, there would often be people who wanted to write poems when they were half drunk. Therefore it was necessary to always have brush and ink. Xianxia saw that the table in front of Lu Laodao was still empty, so he asked in surprise, fellow Daoist Hunyuanzi, why didn't you prepare it? Chapter 84. Lu Laodao stammered for a while, then said, Laodao, I injured my hand the day before yesterday. Xianxia and everyone else cast their gazes on Lu Laodao's hands. Although those hands were not good-looking, nor could they be considered delicate, they were whole without a single wound. Xianxia laughed and said, fellow Daoist, you must be joking. How does this look like an injured hand? Master, it's an internal injury. Li Yunxin knelt beside Lu Laodao and said sadly, previously my master encountered a dog on the street. That dog barked at my master. My master ignored him, but that dog still barked. My master rewarded him with a slap, and in the end his hand was injured. He then looked at Ling Kongzi. This is truly a sad story. His tone and mannerisms were serious, but they were also a little jumpy. Xianxingzi's expression turned cold and he was about to flare up. However, Ling Kongzi laughed softly. Fine. Interesting. Then don't do it for him. Hearing Ling Kongzi say this, the eyes of everyone at the banquet dimmed. But when they heard her next words, their eyes lit up again. Ling Kongzi pointed at Li Yunxin. You do the killing intent. If you do, I'll agree to one of your requests. If you can't, I'll make things difficult for you. Ah. Li Yunxin blinked, appearing very troubled. This kind of rare scroll is very difficult. Xianxia hurriedly straightened his face and coughed. No, he was going to laugh. He was laughing at this kid. He was used to being naughty and mischievous in the marketplace, and he followed that Lu Laodao, so he had not seen the world. How could he smile mischievously and roll on the ground and act obedient in this kind of situation? What kind of expert was Fairy Ling Kong? Seeing how he had no respect for his elders, and how he did not care about his status and etiquette at the banquet, how could she not be angry? Right now it was obvious. A rare scroll. He himself, Xianxia, might not be able to create a rare scroll in his lifetime, and that Lu Laodao was even less capable. Much less a little Daoist boy like him. He leaned forward slightly and said to the prefectural magistrate, "The fairy is angry." Yes. The prefectural magistrate frowned. He glanced at Lu Laodao and Li Yunxin. You old thing, you wanted to vent your anger, but you ended up angering that expert. Be careful not to take it out on him. Xianxia smiled. I know what I'm doing. But we can't let these two walk out of this building unscathed. That Laodao usually uses our name to swindle people. Seeing that he's just a poor man trying to make a living, I don't care about it. Today this brat really doesn't know life from death. If I don't get rid of this kid, I won't be able to get rid of the hatred in my heart. When he grows up, he will definitely be a disaster. The magistrate waved his hand dismissively. It's been more than 10 years, but you're still so impatient. But if that's the case, why did he come to this banquet? Xianxia smiled disdainfully. Previously I also thought of this, so I didn't bother with him. I'm afraid he has a secret background that we never knew about. Today seeing him like this, seeing that Peijuzi again, do you not understand? It's a pity that the first grandson of the nation's master, Dao Meizi, is like this. Look at him now at that banquet, his face is a fool. I heard that he only has female charms. Last night at Gathering Guild, that Miss Huxin. Ah, Miss Huxin is him. Isn't that so? She spent the night with him and then she suddenly died. This Peijuzi, one look and we know he's a good-for-nothing. He must have heard some common folk joke about the 5 concepts and treated it as the truth. Really, AI. Hearing his words, the prefectural magistrate glared, his heart pained. He muttered, AI, it's my fault. I wanted to take the Huxin long ago. AI. The two of them whispered to each other, then looked at Ling Kongzi, only to find that the fairy was looking at Li Yunxin and didn't make a sound. They could see her face, but they couldn't see her face clearly. They all thought that it was an immortal's method to cover her face. Thus they thought that this immortal was truly angry, and was about to send down lightning. On this side, the fairy indicated that she wanted the little Daoist boy to paint on behalf of her master, so someone also brought up brush and ink. Normal brush and ink, normal paper. Even if the 4 concept painters used these tools, their works would be discounted. Let alone this Daoist boy. Xianxingzi's heart was clear and he felt comfortable all over. After the Daoist boy put a paperweight on him, he cupped his hands towards Ling Kongzi. Fairy Laodao, I heard the murderous sound of the wind and rain just now, and I actually heard a bit of murderous intent. A few days ago I saw General Pei's formation breaking diagram, and now I have some understanding. Laodao, I will paint a painting for you, the murderous night rain painting. Ling Kongzi didn't say anything and only nodded slightly. Xianxia said so much and it had already attracted everyone's attention. Although the wild Daoists sympathized with Lu Laodao and didn't like Xianxingzi's way of doing things, they knew that he had real skills. Watching a concept painter paint would also benefit a lot, so they all held their breath and looked at him. They saw that Xianxia first dipped a large brush into the thick ink and with a smack he threw it on the paper. A big ball of ink was thrown out. This move shocked everyone. What was he doing? They saw him smile unhurriedly and then he took out another brush, dipped it in the clear water, and in that ball of thick ink, the brush moved like dragons and snakes, wildly dancing in the air. Then he raised his hand and threw the brush to the ground, stood up, took a deep breath and blew at that ball of ink. He raised his hand and lifted the painting from the mat. At this time, when people saw this painting again, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. The ball of thick ink he had splashed on earlier because of the water halo had already become thick and well-proportioned. It had turned into a ball of rolling rain clouds. And in this ball of rain clouds, there were 2 ink dragons entangled and fighting, and only a few claws and scales were revealed. This painting could be drawn by ordinary people. But to use this kind of painting technique, it was really at the level of a master. What a good murderous night rain painting. Another master painter cheered on the spot. This sentence indeed wasn't flattery. But because once this painting was completed, people with a little bit of skill could see. This was a famous painting. The 2 dragons fought in that rain cloud, although the head and tail couldn't be seen, but they could feel the murderous intent in this painting. This Xianxia actually made the 3rd famous painting in his life tonight. Even Lu Laodao's expression changed. Although they were opponents, he also had the heart of painting Dao. How good would it be if he could also make this painting? Li Yunxin looked at Xianxia's heroic appearance with a grin, and hurriedly clapped his hands. Great. At this time, Xianxia handed the painting to the servant to take, and with a face full of self-satisfaction and pride, he turned to him. Little Daoist boy, you boasted to me before. Now with Fairy Ling Kong on top, it's time for you to make a move and let us see, right? Li Yunxin smiled. I know there are some carefree times in life, but they are very rare. For example, now, you had an orgasm in front of the fairy and now the aftertaste hasn't ended. It's very comfortable. I originally wanted to let you be happy for a while longer. Then you can't wait to court death. I'll do it too. I'll do one, perverted eating painting. Chapter 85. When he said the name, everyone was puzzled. They might not know the word pervert very well, but they knew the word eat. But how could it be used here? For example, hunting in Autumn Mountain was not called hunting in Autumn Mountain. King enjoying himself was not called king playing. The word eating was really vulgar to be used here. Even those unruly Taoists frowned. This little Taoist boy was so confident earlier. Even if he could not create a rare scroll and escape the punishment, he should not embarrass Hunyuanzi Lao Dao. At this moment, Xianxia became more relaxed and magnanimous. Oh, then let us see your. As he spoke, he turned to look at the people in the audience and smiled. Pervert eating while eating? Everyone burst into laughter. Lao Dao moved away from the table and said in a low voice, Brother Exum. Li Yunxin smiled. What's there to be afraid of? Then, under everyone's mocking gaze, he knelt in front of the table and spread out the rice paper. He spread out the paper and chose a small weasel brush from the brush holder. Then he looked at the paint on the table and frowned slightly. Where are the rouge and vine yellow colors? Xianxia smiled and said, Why don't you make an ink painting? It will save some effort. Li Yunxin spread out his hands and said sincerely, To be honest, what I want to draw is not colored. You don't know what it is. Hearing what he said, some people were worried while others were happy. A brilliant painter could draw vivid and lifelike even if he used ink like Xianxia did just now. He would definitely not know what it is. Hearing what he said, he was more like a child who had just learned to draw. Only Lu Laodao was slightly relieved, because he realized that Brother Exin he was playing again. He had seen Brother Xian's painting of Crown Prince Jiawen, who had achieved great success. That painting skill was definitely not inferior to Xianxia's. Brother Xian was good in every way. He just liked to tease people. As he teased and teased, he died from the teasing. Amidst the laughter, a manservant gave him 2 different looks. Li Yunxin dipped the brush into the ink and drew an oval plate on the paper. He hooked a piece of what appeared to be meat on the plate. Then next to the piece of meat he added a cauliflower, 2 beans and a few fruits. At this point no one was talking or laughing. She was shocked by him. The thing he drew, on such an occasion, did he think he was a child learning how to draw? How dare he do this in front of Fairy Ling Kong? Everyone was shocked to the point no one noticed that Ling Kongzi, who sat at the head, had imperceptibly straightened his back. She widened her eyes slightly and looked at the thing that Li Yunxin had drawn. She looked at him, looked at that thing and looked at him again. It was a rare loss of composure. Under such a gaze, Li Yunxin added another knife to the left of the plate. On the right he added a fork. And at this time his expression also gradually became solemn. No longer relaxed, mischievous and cynical, it became somewhat gloomy. Finished with these outlines he stopped his brush. He placed the brush on the brush holder and picked up a white cloud. He used rouge and gamboge to adjust the color of the meat and colored the piece on the plate. It was really a piece of meat. Then he painted other colors in turn. Green cauliflower, beans and a few red fruits. Then he used a bright dawn red color to glow the broth. Finally he put down his brush and slightly closed his eyes for a while before opening them again and laughing. Good. Pervert. A painting of eating. After a brief silence, Xianxia laughed in extreme anger and said softly, "This is the painting that you want to offer to Fairy Ling Kong?" Yes. Fairy Ling Kong wants to transcend the killing tribulation and seek killing intent. And you made this killing intent? Yes. Hee. You have a lot of guts. Xianxia glared at him, reaching out to tear this painting to pieces. From this painting I don't sense a shred of killing intent. Who among you can? When the time came, this great painter would be truly enraged. He only thought that in the past, Li Yunxin was extremely naughty and mischievous, but he didn't expect that looking at it now, besides naughty and mischievous, there was also stupidity. At this time he actually used this method to throw a tantrum. He really, wholeheartedly sought death. No one said anything. Indeed no one could. Even the highest concept cultivation couldn't sense a shred of killing intent from this painting. As for this painting, rather than saying it was a painting, it really might as well be called a graffiti. In this silence he saw Ling Kongzi walk over. If people's eyes weren't mistaken. Right now he saw that Fairy Ling Kong's fingertips that stretched towards the table, attempting to pick up that painting, were faintly trembling. She picked up this painting and held it in her hands, carefully looking at it for a good while. Then, like Li Yunxin, she closed her eyes and opened them again. Xianxia knew that this time the fairy was also extremely angry. He was even more afraid that the fairy would be so angry that she would forget what she had just said, so he sneered and said, "Fairy above. Fairy, please understand, this painting, is it a rare scroll?" Ling Kongzi was silent for a while, then looked at him with a strange gaze, then looked at Li Yunxin. "It's not a rare scroll." A hint of a smile appeared on Xianxia's lips. Just as he was about to speak, he heard a sentence that made him suspect that he was in a dream. "It's a rare scroll." When they heard these words, when no one was able to figure out exactly what it meant, Ling Kongzi had already lightly shook the painting of a freak eating. There was a buzzing sound. Ling Kongzi's clothes, which didn't have the slightest ripple even in the howling wind and rain, actually seemed as if they were blown by a violent gale, and they clattered tightly to his body. It was tangible. Violent killing intent. In an instant, it swept through the entire hall. It was precisely this tremble that, besides Li Yunxin and Ling Kongzi, everyone else was shocked by the killing intent to the point of falling to the ground, and they felt that all the feelings of terror, darkness, hatred and brutality in the world had charged into their minds like a tidal wave at that moment, causing them to almost lose their minds and fall unconscious on the spot. At this time Ling Kongzi seemed to be muttering to himself, "With your realm, of course you can't understand the killing intent here. If you really did, you would also die on the spot." My killing tribulation. It has already passed. Then she placed this precious painting on the table again, and knelt in front of Li Yunxin. She looked at the clear and bright eyes of this youth and asked softly, "You must have also passed the killing tribulation, that's why you made such a rare scroll. How did you pass the killing tribulation?" Li Yunxin smiled faintly, "Personal privacy, no comment." "I know, using a painting to carry the Tao. But why did you clearly draw food, but why did you give birth to killing intent? That's also personal." Ling Kongzi was silent for a while. Then he asked again. "That person, is he still in this world?" Li Yunxin tilted his head and thought for a while. "Who is he?" Ling Kongzi's voice reached his ears and he knew that only he could hear it. The art saint. He sighed and said sincerely, "I don't know." Ling Kongzi frowned slightly, "But clearly, in this world, there can't be a second person who can draw like him." Li Yunxin thought again and smiled. "Let's not talk about this first. Do you think I'm more interesting now?" Ling Kongzi was slightly stunned and then answered, "Yes." "Then do me a favor. I will tell you more interesting things." Li Yunxin stood up and looked at Pei Juzi, whose eyes were rolling around. "There's a ghost in this room." Chapter 86. Li Yunxin's words were full of lies and lies. Therefore when he said, "There's a ghost in this house," no one was surprised by the fact that there was a ghost. Because Li Yunxin himself was enough to subvert all their knowledge. Isn't he? Shirqueezy was overwhelmed by the murderous aura just now. At this moment she was leaning against the railing of the building. Her head was still buzzing as if she had really experienced a life-and-death crisis. Isn't he just a teenager? This was probably the question that everyone wanted to ask, including Lu Laodao. He knew that Brother Xian's background was mysterious and unfathomable. But he was still a teenager, although many people would think that he was 18 or 19 years old when they saw his figure. But Lu Laodao knew that Li Yunxin's real age was, in 3 months he would be 15 years old. Could be said that he was gifted. Li Yunxin was indeed worthy of this evaluation. Therefore, under the guidance of a master, his cultivation progress was rapid. It could also be said that he came from a rich and powerful sect and had seen a lot of things. Therefore, he developed a calm temperament. Furthermore, because of his extraordinary intelligence, everything was under his careful planning and strategizing. But these things couldn't make up for the flaw brought by his age, his lack of experience. And the thing corresponding to this experience was tribulation. A young man had heard a lot of tricks about the ways of the world, and understood a lot of things and the key points in all kinds of things. But there were a lot of things that he hadn't experienced personally, so he couldn't understand them. Without this understanding, the tribulation wouldn't come. It was like a teenager read a lot of books and understood a lot of that thing between adult men and women. He even saw someone demonstrate it for him. But no matter how much he understood, he didn't experience it himself. He didn't know what that feeling was. He didn't know what this feeling was. Even if one day someone gave him such a precious scroll and asked him to immerse himself in it, he would probably have to go through divine tribulation, but it would be a fake divine tribulation like Huainenzi and Panenzi. But now he had created a treasure scroll. That kind of violent and terrifying killing intent had already exceeded the limits of what anyone present could endure and understand. No one could imagine. What exactly had Li Yunxin experienced in the short span of a dozen or so years that he was able to overcome the killing calamity? Moreover, he had such a deep understanding of killing intent. Furthermore, what they found even more unbelievable was a treasure scroll. In this secular world, there was no such thing as a treasure scroll. Even in heavenly caves and sects, treasure scrolls were rare treasures. Above the treasure scrolls were spiritual maps, but there were only a few spiritual maps that had been passed down. Moreover, it was such a treasured scroll that was brimming with killing intent. Either that or Li Yunxin had experienced a rather long life filled with slaughter and blood. Or, he had reached the peak of the transcendent state and was able to create a treasure scroll. According to Ling Kongzi's experience, she could think of the latter point. But for Lu Laodao, Shirquizi, Xianxia and those unruly Daoists, neither point was something they could think of or accept. Thus, at this moment, the astonishment in Xianxing's heart had already far surpassed his terror. It was to the extent that he just sat on the ground and stared fixedly at Li Yunxin, unable to say a single word as he looked at her and Ling Kongzi, sitting and answering each other. What was the identity of this young man? How could he speak like that to the head disciple of Langya Heavenly Cave? At this moment, when he looked at Li Yunxin again, his mind was almost completely taken away by what had just happened. He only felt that every word, every action, and every look of his had a deep meaning. He even felt that he had seen something. Devil chi, purple chi, or whatever it was surrounding him. This Xianxia, because he knew a lot and had a deep understanding, was finally shocked to the extreme by what had just happened. He had lost his mind. On the contrary, the little Daoist boy beside him only knew a little about these things. He only knew that the seemingly ordinary young man had done something earth-shattering, and he was not nearly shocked to death like Xianxia. He got up stealthily and slowly crawled through the crowd with his hands and feet, planning to slip down the stairs. But when he was about to reach the stairs, he heard Li Yunxin say, "Hey, the one over there, the one from the Yu clan, don't go. You want to run after showing off? You really know how to King play with excitement." The little Daoist boy's body slightly stiffened and he broke out in a cold sweat. He gritted his teeth and slowly turned his head to look. As expected, Li Yunxin was looking at him. He saw Li Yunxin waving his hand at him. "You come." At this moment, almost no one spoke for him. This little Daoist boy had seen the world, and he knew that it was best to be obedient at this time, not to make people more irritated, so he walked over without saying a word. His heart slightly moved, and he pretended to be neither servile nor overbearing. His eyes were slightly lowered, but it did not look like he was going to lower his head and admit his guilt. Unfortunately, Li Yunxin did not care about his expression. He was pretending to be blind. But he heard that Ling Kongzi was talking to Li Yunxin at this moment. The latter was distracted when talking to this fairy, and stopped him. "I said I promised you one thing, is that all you want?" Ling Kongzi looked at him seriously and did not look at Pei Juzi. "Catching ghosts. What else could it be? Do you know why I came to the city of Wei?" Ling Kongzi looked into Li Yunxin's eyes. "If I'm right, it's meaningless. If I'm wrong, I might be cheated. So I'm not going to say it." Ling Kongzi sighed. "You don't have to be like this. You have a treasure in your hand. I came for that treasure. I couldn't find you at first, but I knew that 3 cultivators had died, so I followed them all the way here, and then I found another surprise. You have to know, I originally wanted to take you back to the mountain. But I said before that I promised to do one thing for you, and I will definitely keep my promise. This is also a part of my cultivation. So now your request, is it really to catch the Ghost King? Also, why don't you try to escape?" Li Yunxin was originally sitting upright. But now, after listening to her words, his whole body suddenly became relaxed, as if he had given up on something. He shook his head and sighed. His voice became helpless and low, as if he had made up his mind, but still felt uncertain and extremely painful. "Do you remember what I said to you when we first met?" Li Yunxin's eyes seemed to be filled with sorrow and exhaustion, like a martyr who had walked thousands of miles and finally gave up on his ideals. "You." Ling Kongzi sensed Li Yunxin's strangeness. She frowned slightly, not knowing why he suddenly became so depressed. "You mean communism?" Not only Ling Kongzi felt that he had lost his strength, but other people, as long as they were good at observing people's words and expressions, would also think so. But there was only one person. Only Lu Laodao. He recovered from the impact of the killing intent just now, and seeing Li Yunxin like this, his heart skipped a beat. Brother Xing, why are you up to mischief again? This is the brilliant disciple of the Lord of the Dongtian. Chapter 87. Yes. Communism. Li Yunxin nodded his head. After saying that, he was silent for a while. Ling Kongzi was a cultivator, and a cultivator's observation skills were always sharper than ordinary people's. Therefore he could see Li Yunxin's chest rising and falling. His breathing rate was normal, but his shoulders were obviously pressing down. He was trying hard to adjust his breathing, and he was trying to suppress some kind of emotion. Then he raised his head again and waved at the little Taoist boy who was standing obediently beside him. Whine. The little Taoist boy was stunned for a while. He looked at Ling Kongzi and then at his master. But Xianxia was in a daze. He kept mumbling something and did not pay attention to him. The little Taoist boy looked at the magistrate again. The magistrate and the officials had lost their dignity just now. At this time they barely calmed down and straightened themselves behind the table. They were all smart people and naturally knew that the young man was an old acquaintance of Ling Kongzi. Not only was he an old acquaintance, but he was also being chased by her. But at this time no one would be stupid enough to pick a side. Ling Kongzi came from the Langya Grotto heaven, and in the eyes of the ordinary people she was indeed very high. But that young man could actually talk to her like this. How could he be a simple person? It seemed that they could not afford to offend either of them. If it was possible, they wanted to run away. So at this time, the magistrate closed his eyes slightly and ignored him. Seeing this situation, the little Taoist boy carefully walked a few steps away, took a pot of wine from the table in front of the wild Taoists by the window, and handed it to Li Yunxin with both hands. Li Yunxin took the wine pot, lifted it up high and poured it into his mouth. When a line of wine entered his throat, he put the pot on the table and looked at Ling Kongzi. You are a cultivator. You seek the great Tao, seek longevity, and now you have reached the transcendent state. Why? Ling Kongzi didn't even give it a thought before answering. Cultivating the Tao and cultivating to immortality is a great fortune that people yearn for but are unable to obtain. What do you mean by why? Li Yunxin smiled and waved his hand. If I were to guess, you left the Langya Grotto heaven and came to this world and saw many things. Every time he saw something he found it more interesting. You will slowly discover that there are still so many interesting things and interesting people in this world, but another thought in your heart is telling you that these things are just fleeting clouds, and only the path of immortality is fundamental. Now these two thoughts are slowly fighting fiercely in your heart. You are gradually feeling the pain, aren't you? After listening to his words, Ling Kongzi pondered for a moment. Although I don't know why you are saying this. No. I've long known that the greater thousand worlds are more interesting than the lesser thousand worlds. But this thought doesn't make me feel any pain. This is the scariest thing. Li Yunxin sighed. The thought is in your mind but you don't face it. It's not even that you force yourself not to look at it, it's that another consciousness in your heart doesn't want you to look at it. I used to be just like you. Since you are looking for the treasure, you should know that I have lived in seclusion since I was a child, so I have seen many things, and many demons. After seeing them, I know that there are good and bad, and I also know that it is natural for demons to exist in this world. Demons harm people because they don't have a sense of right and wrong. Just like humans harm chickens, ducks, pigs, and dogs, to them we are also demons. Some great demons have many devotees and will only grow stronger. Therefore I thought that if one day these great fiendish demons reach an unimaginable level of strength, to the point where no cultivator in the world can stop them, what should we do? So I thought, why should humans and demons be enemies? Why can't we educate them, accept them, and let them become a part of us? We are humans and they are not humans, but they are still humans. When Li Yunxin said this, his expression became more and more serious, as if he was completely immersed in his own world of theory. When the others heard his words, they were all dumbfounded. The things these two were talking about, compared to them, it was a completely different world, so they could only listen attentively. Your idea is somewhat reasonable, but it is not the right time. Ling Kongzi listened for a while and couldn't help but refute. There are many things that are one thing to say and another thing to do. Accepting the demons may be like what you said about the great harmony of the world, but it is more likely that they will learn profound Tao and the demons will gain power. Once this happens, the world will be in danger. In the long run, it is better to suppress them when they are weak. When Lu Laodao heard Ling Kongzi's words, he finally couldn't help but sigh. He didn't stay by Li Yunxin's side for a long time, but Li Yunxin rarely hid anything from him and even intentionally taught him about the study of heart. So Lu Laodao knew that this fairy Ling Kong was gradually jumping into a very simple trap. When Brother Xen spoke, his expression and attitude were very sincere, and it was very easy for people to believe him. Then there would be some flaws in his speech. The people listening to him might not care much about his point of view. But even so, when they heard the obvious flaws, they couldn't help but try to correct and refute. This was like a piece of cotton cloth placed by the water. If it didn't touch the water, it would always be dry. But even if a corner of it was wet, it was hard to say how much water would be absorbed. She only needed to listen to a point of view, and maybe she could always look at it objectively and rationally. However, once she couldn't help but refute, she would have to think deeply. According to Brother Xian's words, this was the first step of self-hypnosis. Fairy Ling Kong fell into the water. He believed that Brother Xian must have a lot of tricks, such as his understanding of this Ling Kongzi. But Lao Dao felt that he didn't disappoint Brother Xian's teaching by being able to see this level. At this time, Lao Dao had become the third calmest person in this building. He wanted to see what Brother Xian was going to do. So it's still the same question. Hearing her words, Li Yunxin didn't get angry. Instead, there was a sad smile on his face. In the first place, he was a rare handsome man, and Ling Kongzi felt that he was rather interesting. At this moment, seeing him smiling so sadly and thinking of his previous confident look, she suddenly felt a bit of sorrow and pity for him. Why do you want to cultivate? Cultivation runs through your life for years, decades. If one day you find out that it's just a bubble, that cultivation won't lead to immortality and immortality. What will you do? It's like I've spent so many years thinking about this world where humans and demons coexist in harmony. But in the end, I found out. It's just like what you said, my previous thinking was stupid and inappropriate. He threw away the empty wine pot and sighed. I boast that I'm smarter than others, but I've always neglected a problem. For a change, the old aristocratic class is the biggest obstacle. And my previous mistake was that I wanted to initiate a top-down reform. But now I realize that if we don't clean up those rotten and backward big demons, they won't walk into the garbage dump of history. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.